Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Ava awoke the next morning looking into Sean's piercing blue eyes. A sigh escaped her lips as she felt the warmth of his embrace. She felt safe in his arms. She wasn't sure why, she just did. They lay there holding each other for a few minutes till Sean leaned towards her and kissed her gently on the lips and said, "I need to go to the little cowboy room." Ava giggled. "You are not a little cowboy." She let him out of her embrace and listened as he took care of his morning chores. "Sean, do you think we should load up the horses and take them with us, or go into town and take care of our business and come back for them?" "Well, does that trailer have a water tank where we could water them after a while?" Sean asked. "Yes, it does. It's probably empty, but it's easy enough to fill. Then let's just take them with us, and we won't have to drive back out here." "Did that deputy talk you about keeping her horse out here?" Sean was a little uneasy about leaving this house without having someone staying in it. "Sean, do you think she would be interested in staying out here? I hate to think about what could happen to this place with no one around except the hired hand." Sean laughed out loud. "What are you doing reading my mind?" Sean walked out of the bathroom and over to the bed. Ava gave him a quick kiss and scampered off to the bathroom. When she returned, they lay in bed discussing all of the things they wanted to get done before heading back to Sanderson. Ava called the sheriff's office and talked to Darcy Middleton. She had been living with her parents until she found a place of her own. So Darcy was going to house sit for Ava, and Ava was going to furnish Darcy a place to keep her horse. Everyone was tickled pink. While Ava was talking to Darcy about the house, Sean had hooked up Ava's dad's new pickup to the custom horse trailer and filled up the water tank on the trailer. Sean was very impressed with the trailer. It was 34 feet long, but there was just room for 2 horses and their tack in the back with the rest of the trailer set up as living space. The living area was made even larger by having 2 sections that pulled out. One was formed when the hide-a-bed couch was pulled out, and the other when the dining table area was pulled out. Ava and her dad had enjoyed trail rides and team roping, and they had spent many summers traveling together and had been looking forward to another summer together when he was murdered. Sean went into the house to see how Ava was doing. "Ava, the truck has less than a quarter of a tank of gas. We'll have to fill it in town." Ava walked into the kitchen carrying a box full of books. "Take it down by the big shop building. There's a diesel tank there we can fill it out of." Sean frowned. "Sweetie, your dad's pickup isn't a diesel." Ava had a sheepish grin come on her face. "You hooked up the wrong truck." She smiled a mischievous smile, grabbed his hand, and dragged him to the big metal building on the north side of the house. Ava opened the door and walked over and hit the switch to start the overhead doors opening. With the extra light streaming in now, they could see a fire engine red C5500 GMC top kit crew cab sitting inside. Sean stood and stared at the truck. It was as customized as the trailer. It even had a matching paint scheme. Sean turned to Ava and grinned. "Wow. Yeah, you should have heard the fit Sue through the day he brought this home." Ava thought back to last summer and the fun her dad and she had going up to Yellowstone. Ava sighed. "Oh well, the bitch is over it now." Ava walked over and opened the passenger side door. "Come on, let's start this thing up and go swap out that pickup." Sean climbed into the driver's seat and found it to sit like no other vehicle seat he had ever sat in. He looked at Ava, raising his eyebrows. "Custom seats? The best made?" Ava grinned. "Dad spared absolutely nothing on this rig. That's why even the paint job matches." Sean turned the key and waited, assuming it had a glow plug to ease starting. A light on the dash soon came on, and he started the big red truck up and looked around while he waited for the engine to warm up. As Sean poked at the dozens of buttons and knobs, Ava started to smile. Dad loved gadgets, and he had every one he could think of put in this thing. She leaned forward and turned on a screen, and a map popped up. Taking a keyboard, she entered in the addresses of the places they needed to go. When she had finished, another screen showed the route they would need to take. Sean got that impish grin on his face. "What? Do you think I won't stop and ask directions?" "Oh, you." Ava reached over and grabbed Sean by the collar and pulled him towards her, stopping just long enough to stare into his eyes. The seconds passed as each of them sank into the other's eyes. Ava ran her hands up Sean's cheek and into his hair. "I love you so much. You have made me whole." Sean could see her eyes misting up. "I love you too. You have made me believe again. I was ready to give up on ever finding love." The kiss they shared was slow and tender starting out, but soon it progressed to a barn burner. Sean was thinking of checking out the sleeper that the custom truck had when someone started knocking on Ava's window. They broke the kiss to see a red-faced Darcy Middleton standing on the running board. Ava hit the switch and rolled down her window. "Hey, Darcy, is it that time already? Hop in, we'll give you a ride back to the house, and I can show you the place. I just need to help Sean swap out vehicles." "Sure." Darcy got in the back seat and Sean drove out of the big building. "Ava, you don't know how much I appreciate you letting me live out here." Ava turned in her seat to face Darcy. "Hey, this helps us out, too. We didn't want to leave the house sitting empty. Too many accidents happen that way." By the way, I hired Jesse Gomez and his wife back. They'll be moving into the house he lived in before that bitch fired him. Ava saw Darcy's face change expression. Darcy, don't feel bad about shooting her. She was going to kill both of you if you hadn't killed her. She was a murderer, plain and simple. She killed my dad, tried to kill me, and was going to kill that state trooper. You had to shoot her. Darcy nodded her head. I know. I just thought when I left Iraq that I had left killing behind. I am the only deputy that has killed someone in the line of duty in this county in 50 years. Sean stopped beside the trailer. Finish your talk, girls. I am going to unhook this trailer. Sean got out of the truck, unhooked the latch on the gooseneck, and jacked the trailer up. He was about to get in and move the pickup when he heard Ava and Darcy get out of the truck. Ava called out, I'll drive that one back up and put it in the shop where we got this one, and Darcy can use it if she needs it. Ava and Darcy drove her dad's pickup off while Sean hooked up the trailer. He had just finished when he heard the two girls giggling and looked up to see them walking towards him. They didn't look all that different size and shape-wise, but Darcy's bright red shoulder-length hair made her stand out from Ava. Sean called to the girls, Get in. We are going to be all day if we don't get a move on. Ava stuck her tongue out at Sean, then ran and grabbed him for a kiss. Darcy just smiled as she watched them and wondered if she would ever find someone like Ava had. Sean pulled the truck and trailer up in the driveway in front of the house and began to load the boxes Ava had set out. Ava and Darcy went in the house so Ava could show Darcy where everything was and give her instructions on what to do about her dad's and stepmother's clothes. After loading up all the boxes, Sean drove back down to the barn and loaded up Ava's saddle and another one she wanted to bring to the ranch. Looking at his pocket watch, Sean decided it might be a good idea to get some feed for the horses. It wouldn't take many more delays, and they would be spending the night on the road somewhere. The feed in the small tack compartment on the trailer looked old, so after dumping it and cleaning out the container, he refilled it with fresh feed and loaded a bale of hay. He hoped that he had everything that Ava wanted. He'd ask her in a minute. He loaded up the two horses and drove back to the house. Darcy was driving down the road headed for the highway as Sean pulled back into the driveway. Ava was standing there waiting on him. She walked around and got in the truck with Sean. He looked at her. Ready? Ava nodded her head silently, then turned to look out the window. Sean put the truck in gear and started down the road to the highway. Ava sat looking out the window, not saying a word. Sean thought he knew what she was going through, and he searched his mind and heart for something to say. The problem was he remembered how he had felt after his parents had been killed by that drunk driver, and he knew that the right words just didn't exist. So finally he said the only thing he could think of that might help, I love you, Ava. I'm here for you if you need me. Ava turned to face Sean, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to hold him, but the damn seatbelt was in the way. They were just coming into town, and Sean saw a gas station and pulled in the first bay and stopped. Ava had already released her seatbelt and now climbed into Sean's lap and began to cry in earnest. They sat there for over half an hour, him holding her, gently caressing her hair and whispering his love for her. How long they would have sat there is unknown because they were interrupted once again by Darcy knocking on the window of the truck. This time she was on Sean's side, so he rolled his window down and Darcy asked, Everything all right? Sean shook his head negatively. The events of the last few months are hitting home, he told Darcy. Well, Darcy started, it may be about to get worse. Jack Rhymes called right after I got back to the office. Tatum has decided that with Sue Bell dead, there's no good reason to talk. Sean muttered a curse under his breath. So what's Jack going to do? He said if push comes to shove, he'd just extradite him to Mexico. Do you know what he's talking about? Sean searched his memory and could find nothing that fit, but he also knew Jack. 4 years at college and hanging out with him and Simon. And the years since then, spending time hunting every year, he knew that Jack was always gathering information. What information he had now Sean was uncertain of, but he was sure Jack knew something, and knowing that, Sean was sure Tatum would never be free to terrify Ava ever again. Darcy's radio going off pulled Sean from his thoughts. It will be all right. Jack will see to that. Ava's grief had been interrupted by Tatum's name being spoken. Hearing Sean say that everything would be all right put her at ease. She trusted him implicitly and completely. He held her heart. She looked into those steel blue eyes. I love you. He would always hold her heart. He would always protect her. She thought that the first time she saw him, and now she knew it was true. J.D. Tatum was very pleased with himself. When he heard that Sue was dead, he decided that his need to cooperate had ended. But he had forgotten something. Jack Rhymes looked relaxed on the outside, but inside, he was fuming. Tatum's decision to stop talking meant that it would be very hard to convict him for the murder of Dan Bell, just the attempted murder of Ava. Jack decided to remind Tatum why he needed to plead guilty. So, Jack started, You think if you keep your mouth shut and listen to your lawyer you'll get out of this with a minimum time in jail? Tatum grinned at Jack. That's how I see it. So you're sure you don't want to plead guilty and go to prison for the rest of your life? Jack's mind was just about made up. This man was a cold-blooded murderer with no remorse. He'd give him one more chance. If he didn't come around, he'd make the call. Well, this is your last chance. Plead guilty and go to jail in Texas, or Mr. Rios finds out you're here. Tatum's smirk vanished and his face lost all color. You wouldn't, would you? Jack just stared at him. Why not? You tried to kill my best friend's girl. Besides, it's not like I'll be doing anything to you myself. All I'm going to do is make a phone call, then take the sheriff and the deputy out to supper. You'll stay here. Tatum knew he was stuck. You know that this isn't right, don't you? Right. Jack shouted. Right. You murdered a man to get his ranch. You tried to murder his daughter, and you beat a teenage boy to the point of making him a vegetable for the rest of his life. Which one of those acts is right? Tatum sat silent. All his life, he had been a bully, preying on the weak for everything he wanted or needed. Now it seemed the time had come to pay for his crimes. Now he was being bullied. Try as he might, he could not find a way out of the mess he was in. He looked up at Jack. What do you want? Jack was glad to see Tatum come around. He really had no intention of making that phone call, but at the same time, he wanted to make sure Tatum never bothered Sean or Ava again. For the next half hour, he made that point clear to Tatum. When he agreed, he turned him over to the Motley County Sheriff so that he could answer for the murder of Dan Bell. Sean and Ava spent the day talking to Ava's lawyer and Jesse Gomez. Jesse was given the keys to the house that he had lived in when he worked for Ava's dad. She also gave him the keys to her dad's pickup until her lawyer could purchase another one for use on the ranch. It was so late before they left Matador, so they decided that they would spend the night in Lubbock. Ava made a quick phone call to her friend Sarah. Sarah had already left for the restaurant and her hostess job, so she spoke to Josh, Sarah's boyfriend. Sean made the motion of spooning food into his mouth, and Ava asked Josh if he would like to eat supper with them. Josh agreed and said that he would meet them there. Sean and Ava pulled into the parking lot at the restaurant 30 minutes later. Ava went into the living quarters of the trailer so she could freshen up a bit, although Sean assured her that she looked absolutely beautiful. While Ava made herself presentable, Sean checked on the horses. As he was waiting on Ava, his eyes came to rest on the bookstore. It reminded him that he hadn't heard from Johnny Diaz, the little blind boy back home. Sean was so lost in thought, wondering if the boy needed any other books, that he didn't even notice Ava standing beside him. Honey, what are you thinking about? Ava asked. He turned towards her. His blue eyes met hers, and a smile replaced the look of concentration that had been there seconds before. Do you know Simon and Sylvia's phone number? Sean was wondering if he could get hold of the teacher. Yes, I've already programmed it into the cell phone. Why? Sean explained, and a short phone call ensued, and ended with Simon giving Ava a warning about letting Sean anywhere near a bookstore. They started off towards the restaurant hand in hand, but after only a few steps, Sean dropped her hand and put his arm around her shoulder, pulling her closer. For Sean, it was like an adrenaline rush every time he could feel her body against his, and now was no different. He reached to open and hold the door for Ava, and when she walked in, there was Sarah. Sarah and Josh were standing at the podium that held the seating charts. She could not believe the look on Ava's face. My God, you are absolutely glowing. When Josh had called and said that Ava and Sean were on the way there to eat, she couldn't wait to ask her how things were going. But anything Ava told her now would just be details. That she was the happiest that Sarah had ever seen was as plain as the ear-to-ear smile she wore. Sarah and Ava hugged each other as though their lives depended on it, leaving Sean and Josh to introduce themselves to each other. After Sean and Josh had shook hands, a man a little larger than Jack Rhymes, but with that same look about him, stuck his hand towards Sean. You must be Sean, the big man said. Jake Dingle. Jack said, you're all right, and that's good enough for me. Jake motioned with his head towards where Ava and Sarah were still hugging each other. You know, if you hurt her, though, I'll have to hurt you, Jack or no Jack. Sean looked Jake straight in the eyes and said, if I ever hurt her, you'll have to stand in line behind everyone in Sanderson. She has won the heart of everyone I know. Jake smiled and nodded. Yes, she's like that. Another man walked up just then. Sean, Jake said, grinning. This is Don Grossman. He owns this joint. Don, this is the son of bitch that stole our Ava. Don reached for Sean's hand and shook it firmly. Don't pay any attention to him. He acts like an old hen where these kids that work here are concerned. Don turned to Sarah. Sarah, you are officially off duty. Go eat with your friends. Turning back to Sean, Don asked, when is the big day? Sean grinned. Weekend after this coming one. Shaking his head and laughing. We just couldn't get all our ducks lined up before that, try as we might. Another couple walked into the restaurant about that time, forcing the party in the waiting area to break up. Don clapped his hand on Sean's shoulder. Congratulations, son. She is a sweet and wonderful girl. I know you'll both be very happy. Turning to the other hostess, he said, put them over in the fireplace section. Try to keep that whole section just for them if you can, and the meal is on me. Sean tried to protest, but Don refused. Jake leaned over to Sean and said, I have a real good bottle of champagne over there. Do you want me to bring it over? Sean smiled. Why don't you ask Ava? I don't drink. Jake nodded his head. I'm sorry, Sean, I forgot. Jack told me about your parents. I'll get you guys some iced tea over there in just a minute. Jake left to go take care of their drinks while Sean and Josh gently herded Ava and Sarah into following the other hostess to their table. After being seated, Jake brought over their drinks, and the waitress stopped by to greet Ava with a hug and meet Sean. This set the tone for the evening, as members of the restaurant staff, from waitresses to dishwashers, came by to congratulate the couple on their upcoming wedding. The food was excellent, the company even better, and the evening flew by. Sarah and Josh lived in a small house just south of town, not far from the Strip. The Strip is a curious feature of life in the Bible Belt. Lubbock itself is dry, meaning alcohol can't be sold within city limits, but just outside the city, it's allowed. On the east side of Highway 87, liquor stores line up side by side, forming what looks like a long strip mall. Since Josh and Sarah's home was outside city limits, it was a convenient spot to park the trailer and let the horses rest for the night. Sean and Josh took care of the horses while Sarah and Ava went in to continue their visit. Sean and Josh used the time to get better acquainted. They talked as Sean leveled the trailer and strung out an extension cord so that they would have electricity in the trailer. Josh was amazed at the trailer and commented that it sure took the edge off roughing it. They were about to give up on the girls when the front door opened, and they came out looking for the guys. Ava walked up to where Sean was leaning up against the bright red truck and sank into his arms. Looking up at Sean, she said, It's been a very long day. Are you ready to go to bed? Sean smiled as he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Anytime you're ready, sweetie. Ava sighed, squeezed Sean, and then stretched to kiss him on the lips. The kiss might have started off as just a small demonstration of affection, but it rapidly evolved into something that was going to necessitate the removal of clothes any minute. The kiss might have continued if not for Sarah's giggle. Good night, you two, Sarah laughed. You better get inside before you do something that could get you arrested. Sarah grabbed Josh's hand, and they went in the house, leaving the two lovers still kissing passionately. Josh had an 8 o'clock class, so he was up at 7 getting ready. He looked out the front door to see Sean already dressed and taking care of the horses. Josh had his jeans and boots on, but no shirt when he walked out to see if Sean or Ava wanted any breakfast. He had just greeted Sean when Ava stuck her head out the door and asked him if he wanted something to eat. Finding that Ava already had everything fixed, he went back inside to get Sarah and a shirt. After the four of them finished their breakfast, Josh said his goodbyes and left for class. Sarah's first class was at 9, so she gave Ava a hug and went inside to finish getting ready. Sean and Ava finished cleaning up the small kitchen and then got the trailer ready for the 6-hour trip back to Sanderson. By the time Sarah was finished getting ready for school, Sean and Ava had the trailer ready and the horses loaded. After hugs, kisses, and goodbyes, Sean and Ava loaded up and headed south. They'd see Sarah again weekend after next at the wedding. It was a long but uneventful drive for Ava and Sean. They had stopped several times to check on the horses and again for lunch in Midland. While in Midland, Sean did have a passing thought as to where in the world his dad's old buddy Hanley was. He'd been in Switzerland when Mom and Dad were killed. That thought led to Sean opening up to Ava about his parents. Growing up isolated on the ranch the way they were, he had always been very close to both parents. When he was little, his mom and dad were the only people around for him to play with, and the three of them really enjoyed their time together. Sean's first year of going to school had been a real eye-opener. Many of the parents of the other kids wanted time away from them. Sean's mom had taught him how to cook, even how to sew, and every day there was time for one or both parents to read with or to him. His parents were his best friends. That's why when the drunk driver in San Angelo plowed through their pickup, killing both of them, Sean had been devastated. It wasn't just his mother and father he had lost. It was the only two people he trusted and confided in. Ava's relationship with her dad had been much the same as Sean. 6 months ago, she had grieved her dad being killed in a car wreck. Now she had learned that it was really murder. In some ways, it was like he had been killed all over again. So the trip back to Sanderson became a time to talk about their parents. It was a time to learn and a time to heal, and they were doing it together. It was a little after 4 in the afternoon when they pulled up to the cafe in Sanderson. That time of day, the cafe normally wasn't all that busy, but today there were quite a few vehicles parked in front of it, including one Sean hadn't seen in a long time. Come on, Sean said, the excitement obvious in his voice. There is someone you just have to meet. Sean practically dragged Ava into the cafe. To Ava, he was like a kid on Christmas morning heading for the presents. When they got inside, there were Sam, Simon, Sylvia, Dallas, and Jack all gathered around a couple and a small girl. Sean bellowed out, "Where's that no-account quack?" The group around the couple all parted enough for the man sitting at the table to see Sean. "Damn it, Sam. You'll let anybody come in here. Looking straight at Sean, he continued, what are you up to, you sorry sheep herder? And unhand that girl. She's much too pretty for the likes of you. If anyone had been in the cafe that didn't know these two, they would have sworn they were mortal enemies about to square off to fight. But almost everyone in the cafe was laughing. Sean put his arm around Ava and said, Ava, this is Dr. R period, E period, D period. Sean made a point out of each initial as he spoke. Dr. Red, also known as Rolf. He stretched the word out, making it sound like a cartoon dialogue. Everett Dumming. I mean dimwit. No, that's not it. Oh yeah, Deming. Ava was giggling at Sean's exaggerated antics while the man at the table was just shaking his head. So it's true. Only a man in love would act that foolish. He hasn't been jumping on any furniture, has he? He smiled and spoke to Ava. Sweetheart, please come over here. I really need to talk you out of this before you make a terrible mistake. The man's grin betrayed that there's nothing serious about his words. Ava stepped forward, extending her hand. It's good to meet you, Ralph. No more than the words had escaped her mouth than the entire cafe erupted in laughter as Red cringed at being called by his first name. Honey, he had to shout over the laughter. Call me Everett, call me Red, call me a low-down son of Polecat, but please, don't call me Ralph. Ava grinned from ear to ear and a little wrinkle formed in the corner of her right eye. It was a look her dad had known well and one that Sean had noticed the night before when she had been teasing him. Okay, I'll try to remember that, Ralph. The cafe was once again plunged into laughter. Oh my God, Red complained. She's just like he is. When the laughter died out, Sean introduced Ava to Maria, Red's wife, and little Tina, Maria's daughter. They sat with their friends and visited. Sean excused himself to go check on the horses. When he came back inside, Ava informed him that Red, Maria, and Tina would be staying with them until the wedding. Sean was about to protest when Jason Adams, the sheriff's deputy, slid his Explorer to a stop and ran into the cafe. Jason, what's going on? Sean had an idea. He wasn't going to like what he had to say. They found the deputies that were transporting Tatum back to Matador in Fort Stockton. Someone had used a stun gun on them. Jason really didn't want to say the rest of it. Sean glared at him. What are you saying? Jason looked from Sean to Ava before he spoke. Tatum is gone. He's escaped. The color drained from Ava's face, and suddenly her legs were no longer capable of holding her up. Before Sean could take a step, Maria had her by the arm, taking her to the bathroom. Sean looked at Jason. Where's Jack? He told me to tell you not to worry. Jason knew when he said it that it sounded stupid. Sean, he's checking on something, he thinks. Well, he has an idea what happened to him. Sean stood glaring at Jason, waiting on him to finish. Well? Sean shouted. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or am I going to have to do something that neither of us wants? Jason didn't want to say what he thought, and that was that Jack Rhymes had called someone in the Talavera family. It was just as possible, even probable, that someone here in town had called and reported Tatum's presence. Jason, damn it. Jason's hem-hawing was fast, using the last of Sean's calm. You start telling me what's going on, or we are about to have a big problem. Jason was trying to figure out how and what to say to Sean when Jack pulled up. Jack took one look at Sean and knew he was wound up tighter than an 8-day clock. What the hell is going on, Jack? Sean's voice removed any remaining doubt that he was pissed. Jack was opening his mouth to start explaining Tatum's connection with the drug family across the river when his cell phone rang. Jack reached to take the phone off his belt. Sean hated cell phones. He didn't like hearing them when he was eating, and he damn sure didn't like one going off while he was trying to get some answers. Red, who had followed Sean out, looked on with some concern. Right now, he figured Sean's blood pressure had to just about off be the scale, so it was with no small amount of concern that he put his hand on Sean's shoulder. Not now, Doc. The venom in his voice caused a cold chill down Red's neck. It also had the desired effect of causing Jack to interrupt his phone conversation. Sean, just calm down. Ava is in no danger. Jack looked at Sean questioningly. Come on, bud. Have I ever lied to you? When Jack had told him to calm down, Sean's fist had clenched, and what little control he had left was used up when he didn't punch Jack in the nose. Jack had been his roommate his first year in college. Their friendship had been solid ever since, and only the fact that he hadn't ever lied to him assured Sean that Ava was not in danger and allowed him to start to calm down. Sean and Red had both been right there listening to Jack's side of the phone call, but it had been mostly yes, no, and I don't know until Jack said, well, Dr. Deming is here, I'll ask him. Jack held the phone to his chest and asked. When they found the two deputies in Fort Stockton, there was a jack of clubs playing card laying on one of the deputies' chest. You have any idea what that means? Red started nodding his head. Yeah, I think I do. But if you want to know for sure, get hold of Eduardo Duarte. He's a federale that covers from Ojinaga north. Jack groaned. Do you have any idea how much red tape is involved getting information from those people? Call and ask for Eduardo. Tell him I said for you to call him. Red pulled out his billfold and dug through it looking for something, eventually pulling out a well-worn business card. Here, this is his direct number. If he's not there, leave a message using my name. He'll get back to you quick enough. Jack informed the party on the other end of the phone that he had to make a call and ended that conversation. Jack was about to start explaining to Sean what was going on when Sean stopped him. Call this Eduardo fellow, then tell me everything. Jack made the call, and in just a few minutes knew exactly what the playing card meant. Before the conversation was over, Jack also knew he had made a new and very valuable contact. The doctor would let him know how trustworthy it would be. Jack ended the call with the federale and began explaining Tatum's role in beating a teenager to the point of brain damage and who that teenager was. The federale had told him that the jack of clubs left at the scene was the calling card of the boy's father. Whatever else Tatum was, he would never be a threat to Ava ever again. His life wasn't worth one thin dime right now, and that was assuming he was still alive. Sean simply nodded his understanding, turned, and walked into the cafe to find the love of his life. Jack and Red watched him go. Jack finally breaking the uneasy silence. I've never seen him like that. I knew he loved that girl, but I had no idea it was that strong. God help anyone who gets between him and that girl. Red laughed. From what little that I've been around her, she seems to be the same way about him. How long have they been dating anyway? Jack looked at his watch and smiled. This is Tuesday. They've been together since Friday afternoon, for days. He saw her for the first time a week ago Friday. Jack was shaking his head. You know he dated Dana, his first wife, for 4 years? He never was like this with her. Jack smiled at the doctor. I hope that means it won't end up like that one did. Red nodded his head. Yeah, I hope so too. He was a mess after that bitch got through with him. One thing's for sure, Jack. Jack looked at the doctor. Ava is nothing like Dana was. Thank God. Jack chuckled quietly. Yeah, you can say that again. With that, Jack and Red started walking back into the cafe to join their friends, talking as they went. Red, what brings you and Maria out this way? Usually the only time I run into you is in Presidio. Doc Eller twisted the arm of one of the drug companies and got me a bunch of samples for the clinic. Red explained. Then when Doc told me that Sean was getting married, we decided to stick around for the big event. I called Eduardo and told him we'd be back in a week or so, and here we are. I don't have a clue where we are going to stay. Guess I better go get Maria and Tina and see about a motel room. Red had just finished getting those last words out of his mouth when Ava spoke up. Oh no you don't, Ralph. Maria, Tina, and you will be staying with us at the ranch. I can't let my flower girl stay in any old motel. Ava was holding little Tina in her arms. The girl's face was absolutely glowing. We decided that before you went outside. You really ought to pay better attention there, Ralph. Ava winked at him as he cringed at her use of his first name. Everyone in the cafe had broken out laughing when Ava had used Red's first name. After his initial cringe at hearing his first name used, he looked to Maria to see what she thought. Maria simply raised her eyebrow and smiled. Tina is very taken with her new Aunt Ava. So unless you want to upset her, you're stuck. Maria's smile was disarming. Red turned to Ava and said, we'd love to be your guests. When Simon and Sylvia showed up at the cafe, even more fun broke out. Sean got with Simon since both he and Ava had vehicles in town. Simon made a couple of quick calls and 2 of his AG students showed up. Sean handed them the keys to his pickup and Ava's Jeep and told them to meet back at the cafe. When the boys got back, Sean asked them if they had eaten. When they told him they hadn't, he set them down and told Sam to get them what they wanted and ordered a cheeseburger for himself. That was followed by the rest of the gang putting in their orders. Ava gave Sam a hand delivering the orders, and finally a dent was put in the noise level as everyone settled in to eat. After everyone had finished eating, Sean wanted to get back to the ranch. Getting everyone pointed in the right direction was a lot like herding cats. Finally, he looked over at Ava, pushed his hat up so that it sat on the back part of his head, and said, the horses, and I will be waiting. Ava and Sam couldn't help but laugh as he walked out the door shaking his head. Ava went over to Red, who was engaged in a very animated conversation that involved a plethora of hand gestures. Just as she walked up, Red's left hand came directly at her in a sweeping motion. She caught the hand and arm before it hit her. You sure are dangerous when you talk, Ralph. Ava was reduced to a fit of giggles as the good doctor's face blushed crimson. Your face is red, Red, she said between giggles. After several attempts to speak had failed, Red looked to Maria for help. Would you like to go now, before you make a bigger fool of yourself? Maria said with a laugh. Red simply nodded his head, which had the effect of reducing the entire group to laughter. As everyone was getting ready to go, little Tina turned to her mother. Mama, may I go with Aunt Ava? Maria smiled and nodded her head. Tina ran to Ava and grabbed her hand. The 2 of them walked out to join Sean in the truck. Shortly after that, it looked like a small parade as the group drove out to the ranch. Sean gave the 2 boys who had driven his and Ava's vehicles out a few dollars, and they left to find Simon so they would have a ride back to town. Sean put the two new horses in a pen by themselves to make sure there was no fighting for position in the pecking order. He then unloaded the few items that Ava had put in the small refrigerator in the trailer and took them into the summer kitchen. By the time he got in the house, Ava had everyone settled in a room for the night. Later, as they lay in bed, Ava asked, "Did Jack tell you about the papers he found in the envelope we got out of the safe at the ranch?" Sean gave Ava a kiss. "No, sweetie, he didn't. Were they important?" Apparently, Sue was trying to lease out the ranch to an oil company behind Dad's back. Some man called Dad and was asking about it. That's when Dad got tipped off. Ava began to sob. Why, Sean? Why did she have to kill him? He gave her anything and everything she ever wanted. Why? I just don't understand. It's greed. Pure and simple. Sean sighed. I told you that I had been married before. Dana and I had dated from the time her dad was transferred here with the railroad. We got out of high school and went to college. My mom and dad really didn't like her, but I didn't see what they saw. We got married and she changed, always wanting things. Jewelry, new cars, everything had to be the very best. She started making plans for the time when the ranch would be ours. When I came home one day and found the maps and letters where she was going to break up the ranch and sell it off for hunting leases, I almost lost it. I told her I would never break up the ranch. She said as soon as it was in my name it was half hers and there wouldn't be a damn thing I could do. I filed for divorce the next day. She thought I had a lot of money squirreled away. She got so mad and threw such a fit that the judge ended up finding her more than what she got from her half of what I had. I guess the thing that hurt the most was that she never really loved me. I was just a means to an end for her. All I was an asset she could liquidate. Ava looked into Sean's eyes. Her hand reached up to touch his face. That's why you were trying to ignore me that night at the restaurant. Sean smiled at Ava. Yeah, that, and I couldn't believe someone as young and beautiful as you would really want anything to do with me. There was something in your eyes, though. All week long, every time I thought about that Friday night, I knew that I had let something slip away. That's why I was on my way back to Lubbock. I had to find you. I had to find out if you were the one. Ava looked at Sean. The look was one of pure love. I knew, Sean. I knew the second I saw you that you were the one for me. I wasn't going to give up. I couldn't. Over the next few days, things were more or less normal around the ranch. Red took off and made a trip across the river, giving medical attention to any that needed it. Maria and Tina stayed at the ranch with Ava, and she was amazed to learn about Maria. Maria looked nothing like the stereotypical Mexican woman. Instead of Indian features that dominate the Mexican population, Maria had reddish blonde hair and blue eyes. She had passed these features on to Tina. Ava was surprised to learn that Tina was not Red's daughter. Maria had been married to a young man who had left to work in the oil fields of West Texas, where he had been killed in an accident. When Ava listened to the story of Maria's life, she was amazed at how she was able to always be upbeat and look for the bright side of every dark cloud that came her way. Tina was just like her mom. She was also a sponge for information. At 4, she could already read, and like her mother, she was multilingual. Maria and Tina spent much of their days at the ranch exploring the Miles family library and reading from its many volumes. Life on the ranch, though, knows no rest, and the thunderstorms that rolled through on Wednesday meant that Sean and Ava would be very busy repairing the many water gaps on the ranch. Thursday morning, Sean had the mules hitched to the wagon and the wagon full of T-posts and wire, both net and barbed. The first gap they came to was the one on the spring-fed creek of the house pasture. Water gaps are made where a fence crosses a creek, or, as is most often as the case is in West Texas, a draw or gully that is bone dry 99% of the time. The gaps are made so that in a best case the water is allowed to run through the fence, but if trees, brush, or, as sometimes happens, sheep and goats get washed into and tangled up with the fence to the point that it forms a dam, only the gap gets washed out rather than pulling down the surrounding fences. As is often the case in West Texas the day after heavy rains like the ones Wednesday, this day would be sunny, very sunny. Actually, it was damn hot. Down in those creek beds and gullies where the wind couldn't be felt with 90+ temperature and the leftover humidity from previous days' rain, it was, in a word, miserable. By noon, Sean and Ava had checked and repaired 6 water gaps. The last one had had a small hackberry tree take out the entire gap and had to be completely rebuilt. Dripping with sweat, Sean looked at Ava and said, "Have I told you that I love you today?" Ava pulled the bandana out of her back pocket and wiped at the sweat that was running down her back. "No, but you better, otherwise I am going to quit on you." "I love you, Ava." Sean's smile was going from ear to ear. "Let's load up. A little over a mile from here is a spring. We'll eat lunch there." They loaded up their tools and what wire they had left and started for the spring. "We don't have much wire left after that last one. How many more gaps do we have?" Ava asked. "Well," Sean started, "there's another reason for going to the spring. We have a small shack there where we keep extra supplies. We'll restock, but there aren't that many gaps left and the rest of them are all small. Sean had just finished his sentence when he smelled smoke. It could have been caused by a lightning strike, but that possibility evaporated when Sean and Ava heard a woman scream. Sean had already been scanning the hills for smoke and had just spotted it when they heard the scream. Sean pulled up on the mules and reached down to pull the lever-action .45 long Colt rifle from its scabbard under the seat along with an extra box of cartridges. Ava hadn't been idle either. She had pulled out the Mini 14 she had brought from her father's ranch and was searching under the seat for the extra clips she had put there earlier. Sean looked at Ava, the concern showing on his face. "I don't guess there is any way in the world I can convince you to stay here, is there?" The look on her face was one of pure determination. "If we are going to make it, we have to do things together. Good things, bad things, doesn't matter, but always together." Sean nodded his head. He could live with that. He hoped they could both live. Another scream had them out of the wagon and moving up the hill as fast as they could. As they eased up to look over the hill, they saw 10 young women or girls cowering as one of 2 men beat another woman. "Smell that?" Ava asked. "Yeah, smells like cigar smoke." Sean replied quietly. "Neither of those 2 are smoking." Ava's eyes were scanning the area looking for another man, and then she whispered, "There, look by that creosote bush. Is that smoke?" Sean smiled and grinned. "Way to go, Eagle Eye." Ava swatted him lightly on the arm. "Be serious. What do you think is going on?" "I'd say those 3 are coyotes, low-life scumsuckers that smuggle people across the border. But it's strange them coming this way. It's a long way to a highway from here." Sean was interrupted when the man started to rip off the girl's clothes. "Sean, we can't let him assault her." Ava was both frightened and angry. "I know, sweetie. Look, the only cover they have is right there where Cigar Man is. If I go back down the hill and circle around to that hill there," he pointed to the hill he was talking about. "If I'm there, they won't have a chance unless they grab one of those women for a hostage." Sean paused for just a second. "We can't let them do that, you know." Sean smiled when he saw the quiet determination on Ava's face. "Okay, when I get over there, you holler at them. Be ready, but stay down no matter what. You hear?" Ava nodded her head. "I love you." "I love you too, be careful." Sean eased back down the hill and sprinted around to the other side. When he reached his position, he was winded, his heart pounding in his chest. The man had just knocked the girl to the ground when Ava yelled and fired a shot, landing just a few feet behind him. The 2 men who had been attacking the girl lunged toward the man with the cigar. Sean quickly fired a shot in front of them to stop their advance. The man with the cigar stood up with a hunting rifle, looking ready to shoot at Ava. Without hesitation, Sean took him down. Sean saw Ava slip down the hill, likely positioning herself for a better shot. When the man with the cigar stood, Sean noticed a girl with him, bound and vulnerable. One of the attackers pulled out a pistol and grabbed the girl, holding it to her head. He shouted up to Sean, "Put your rifle down and come out, or I'll kill her." Sean assessed the situation and knew that if he just wounded the man, he'd kill the girl. Aiming carefully, Sean shot the man in the groin, causing him to drop the pistol and scream in pain. The second attacker tried to sneak away, believing he was out of view, but Ava had already seen him hide the pistol in his waistband. As he walked toward Sean, hands raised in surrender, Ava kept her rifle trained on him. "Gringo, I give up. Don't shoot," he yelled. Sean felt uneasy and scanned the area, trying to locate Ava. When their eyes met, she gave a subtle signal, miming a pistol with her hand. Sean called out, "You make one move towards that gun, and you'll end up like your friends." The man quickly pleaded, "No, senor. I don't have a gun." Sean tested him. "How about I shoot you like I did your friend?" The man looked at his wounded partner writhing on the ground, then glanced around, clearly weighing his options. Sean, guessing the man was right-handed, shot him in the palm of his right hand. The man screamed in pain and tried to pull the pistol with his left hand, but was cut down by both Ava's and Sean's shots. The combined impact was fatal, tearing through his chest. Sean shouted to Ava, "Keep an eye out while I check them out." It didn't take long to confirm that the man with the cigar and the other attacker were dead. The third man, already losing blood, was beyond saving. He wouldn't make it back to the ranch. Sean signaled for Ava to join him, and they started trying to talk to the women. It didn't take long to find out that they were illegals, but they were what the immigration people call OTMs, other than Mexican. In fact, all of the girls were from Brazil. Neither Sean nor Ava spoke Portuguese, but one of the girls could speak a little English. Through her, they were able to calm the others down. Since they had not had food or water in 2 days, the coyotes had refused to let them eat unless they had sex with them. Ava fed them from the emergency supply Sean kept under the seat in the wagon. While Ava fed the girls, Sean took the wagon over to the shack at the spring, which was little more than a quarter of a mile away, and unloaded all of the T-posts and wire from the wagon to make room for the girls. By the time he returned, the girls were ready for the long ride back to the ranch. Sean went to check on the one wounded coyote and found that he had died. Sean had very little remorse for these people. Just last year, another group near Presidio had locked 25 people up in the back of a tractor-trailer rig and left them to die in the 100-plus-degree heat of summer. They preyed on the weak. This time, there was someone stronger than them. Should we bury them? Ava asked. Shaking his head, Sean said, no. Leave them, I'll have to bring Jack and Dallas out here tomorrow. Ava got the girls loaded into the wagon. It was very crowded, and then they headed back to the ranch house. A long, hot 3 hours later, Sean stopped the wagon in front of the house. He was very glad to see Red's four-wheel drive Suburban sitting at the house. That meant he could give the girls the medical attention they might need. Tina came running out when she heard them pull up, and Sean sent her back inside to get her mom and Red. Ava helped the girls out with Maria, Red, and even little Tina trying to lend a hand. Sean smiled at the little girl. Tina, you want to help me unhitch Pete and repeat and take care of them? She turned to her mother and said something Sean didn't understand. Maria responded in kind, and Tina looked at Sean and said, she said I could. That wasn't Gaelic, was it? Sean asked the girl. No, that was Simru, the language of the Welsh. We found some books on it in your library, so Mother and I have been learning to speak it, little Tina said, as if it was the easiest thing in the world to pick up a book and in a couple of days be speaking another language. Sean laughed. Well, when we get back, I guess you better look and see if there's a book in there on Portuguese. Tina grinned, giggled, and said, Vocês não falam português? Sean laughed. I should have known. He then picked Tina up and sat her on the wagon seat, climbed up beside her, and drove the team to the barn. He hated not to clean his and Ava's rifles, but he thought he'd better wait until he heard from Dallas. After he and Tina finished up, they walked back to the house. Ava and Red were in the house kitchen when he and Tina walked in. Honey, I guess I'll drive into town and get a hold of Dallas. Red spoke up. Sean, I've got a phone you can use. It's a satellite phone. I conned one of those knotheads with Homeland Security that I might see something they would need to know about. I started to call for you, but figured you'd want to talk to Dallas. Yeah, thanks, Red, Sean said. He then had Red show him how to call, and he explained to Dallas what had happened. Dallas said he would get everyone together, and they would meet them at the ranch first thing in the morning. Sean handed the phone back to Red. Thanks, I sure was dreading that drive. I'll bet. What did he say? Red asked. They will all be here first thing in the morning, Sean told his friend. Ava sighed. I better get some more bacon and sausage out of the freezer. Then she left to do so, leaving Sean alone with his thoughts for a few minutes. When she returned, she grabbed Sean by the arm. Come on, let's go to the outside shower, then into the hot tub. I've already lit a fire in the snorkel unit. It's heating up right now. Sean didn't have an argument left in him by that point, and he and Ava went out to knock the grime and grit off. While they were showering, Sean asked, where are all the girls? Well, since you and I had cleaned out the bunkhouse yesterday, Maria and I thought that would work just fine. Ava laughed and continued. Oh, by the way, we used up most of your Gatorade. Red said those girls were real dehydrated. That's fine. Are they going to be all right otherwise? Sean asked. Ava sighed and said, 2 of the girls had been assaulted repeatedly. The one that was naked is in the worst shape. Sean, I don't care if the girls stay here or whatever the government wants to do with them, but that girl is going to need a lot of help. Do you think Dallas or Jack could see to it? I'll pay for it out of the Matador Ranch account, if that's a problem. Sean just nodded his head. I'm sure Jack can find someone to help her. Sean pulled Ava in for a blistering kiss. I love you. Sean and Ava finished their shower and made their way to the hot tub. Sean closed the damper to smother the fire, and he and Ava got into the hot tub. It didn't take long for the warm water to revive them, and even less time for them to start making love. Tomorrow there would be sheriffs and questions, but right now none of that mattered. Right now it was just Sean and Ava together under the stars. Sleep was a long time coming for Sean that night. When he did fall off to sleep, it was restless and filled with dreams. For Ava, the night was even worse. Since the first night that they had slept together, she had found that she slept like she had before her dad had been murdered. It was as though she drew comfort, love, and security from Sean. Gone were the nightmares of her father's wreck and his lonely death. All that was replaced by the warm, gentle strength of Sean. Tonight, though, Sean's tortured sleep seemed to only get worse, until somewhere around 1 in the morning. It was then that he suddenly became peaceful. It happened so suddenly, in fact, that Ava felt a panic come over her until she realized he was breathing normally. In his dreams, Sean relived the shooting over and over. Sometimes he was shot, sometimes Ava was, and in his dreams he would scream out his rage. The last of these dreams happened a little before 1 in the morning. Then suddenly he was plunged into a dream unlike any he had ever had. Sean's dream. Sean walked into the summer kitchen, listening as his mother sang softly. The kitchen was rich with the smells of bacon and eggs. She urged him to sit and poured him a cup of tea, sat the teapot down and kissed him on the forehead as she had thousands of times before, and said, "Morning, my boy." It was as though she had never died. Everything seemed to be back like it was before that day, That horrible day. The outside door opened and Sean's dad walked in, put his hand on Sean's shoulder, patted it, and said, "Morning, son. Did you sleep well?" His dad sat down as his other handed him a cup of coffee. As he stirred in some sugar, he looked over at Sean and smiled. "You have done well, Sean. The ranch looks great. I like the changes you have made. We knew when you met that girl that things were going to get better for you." Sean looked up as Ava waddled into the summer kitchen, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Sean stared at her as she was big with pregnancy, 7 or 8 months at least. She walked over to Sean's mother and kissed her on the cheek. His mother interrupted her cooking to pull Ava into a hug, being ever mindful of the precious cargo she carried in her belly. Ava then walked over behind Sean's dad and draped her arms over his shoulders and around his neck, leaning over to give him a kiss on his cheek. Sean was still in shock. How are my parents alive now? When did Ava get pregnant? It was all so real, but it couldn't be, could it? Ava whispered something into his dad's ear, and they both broke out laughing. She walked over to Sean, motioning him to scoot his chair back. He did, and she sat in his lap. Taking his left hand, she placed it on her swollen belly. "Your son and daughter are trying to kick their way out this morning. Here, feel." She placed Sean's hand on her belly, and he felt the tiny hands and feet as they pushed and kicked at the inside of her womb. Ava kissed Sean on the lips, lightly at first, but then with more and more passion until Sean's dad cleared his throat. Ava giggled and said, "I need to set the table." Ava got up and started setting dishes and silverware around the table. Sean looked at the table and saw that she had set 6 place settings. Looking up at Ava, he asked, "Who else is here?" "I'm not going to tell you. It's a surprise," she giggled. "You'll have to wait and see." She had no more finished saying that than in walked a tall man who he only knew from photos. It was Dan Bell. Holding his hand was a woman who almost looked like Ava, but she was different. "Mom," Ava screamed, "you made it. Oh, I'm so glad to see you again. It's been such a long time." Tears were streaming down her face. "I missed you so much." After they had hugged and cried, Ava and her mother helped each other set the table. Ava's mom was beautiful and looked to be only a few years older than Ava herself, but then she had died shortly after Ava was born. Sean watched with an open mouth as 4 people who were supposed to be dead talked and visited like old friends. They laughed and talked about the coming birth of the twins and how busy he and Ava would be after their arrival. The 4 parents told Sean and Ava to follow their faith, love each other, and help those that they could. They finished breakfast, and then the 6 of them sat at the table and visited until the 4 parents said it was time for them to go. There were hugs, handshakes, kisses, and tears as they said their goodbyes. Then, as though it happened every day, they walked out the door and disappeared into the twilight with promises to always watch over them. Just like that, Sean was ripped from his dream and plunged back into the restless sleep he had been in when the dream started. He wanted to see his parents again. There was so much more he wanted to know, wanted to tell them, but they were gone. His sudden return to troubled sleep woke Ava up. She watched as Sean tossed and turned, mumbling the names of his parents. Then he said, "Dan, Marilyn, come back, please." Ava's heart almost stopped. She thought back. She had never told Sean her mother's name. Again he mumbled, "Marilyn, Dan, Mom, Dad, come back." Sean rolled over onto his back. Ava moved over on top of Sean and started kissing him. "Sean," Ava called softly. She kissed him softly on the lips. Ava continued kissing and rubbing her body against Sean until at least his body began to respond. Ava persisted in trying to gently wake Sean from his now distressing dream. Ava moved down his body and took his now hard manhood into her mouth. Once it was well lubricated, she moved up, straddled his hips, and impaled herself on his hardness. Sean's confusion was mounting. First a visit by 4 people long dead, then, while he was trying to call back his parents and in-laws, he was getting aroused. His mind turned to Ava. Was it true, he wondered? Would Ava have twins? Was she pregnant now? He realized how careless he had been. He hadn't asked her about protection. Sean thought about how he felt about Ava, the butterfly that had flown into his life. Now his life seemed full. The more he thought of her, the more powerful the feeling of belonging became. He wanted to kiss her, and that want began to overpower the sense of loss left from the dream. Ava knew the moment Sean began to stir from the restless sleep he'd been trapped in for the past half hour. He turned his head slightly, his lips moving as if about to speak. Ava gently cradled his face in her hands and kissed him softly, hoping to bring him fully back to the present. Sean's eyes opened. Ava's kiss grounded him, clearing the last haze of his dreams. He realized she was sitting beside him, holding him close, her presence calming and familiar. The connection between them ran deep, stronger than words, stronger than time. He pulled her into a tight embrace, overwhelmed by how much he cared for her, how much he needed her by his side now, tomorrow, always. Their closeness felt like the center of the world. In that moment, they were everything to each other. Their bond gave them strength, strength to face anything, anyone, together. Down the hall, near the library, Maria turned to Red and whispered, "Have you ever seen two people more connected than those two?" Red smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "I have," he said gently. "I see it every time I look at you." He kissed her forehead, and Maria smiled, her eyes glowing with emotion. What had once been a house full of silence and solitude now pulsed with warmth and affection. The change was unmistakable. Back in their room, Sean and Ava lay side by side, basking in the peace that followed their moment of connection. As the quiet returned, they could hear the soft sounds of the house again. Ava let out a quiet laugh. "I think we started something," she whispered as she rested her head on Sean's chest. Sean smiled and gently ran his hand through her hair. "Sean," she murmured, "what were you dreaming about?" "You were saying my mom and dad's names, but I don't think I ever told you my mother's name. They were here. In the dream, I mean. They introduced themselves to me. My mom and dad were here as well, and they know each other and are very happy that we are together." Sean paused for a minute. The look on his face was one Ava had not seen, and she could not stand it. "What is it?" "There's something else, something you're not telling me." Ava's face was only inches from Sean's. "Tell me, is there something wrong?" Sean rolled Ava over on her back, rising up where he could see her in the moonlit room. Then he took and ran his hand over Ava's flat tummy. "Are you pregnant?" The question was unexpected. "I'm on the pill, you know that, but it's not foolproof. The only reason I started taking it was because I had some trouble with my period." "But why are you asking? What's wrong?" Sean's hand was gently resting on her tummy. "In the dream, you were pregnant. Really pregnant. You said it was my son and daughter." For the next few minutes, there was silence. Ava lay there, content in the love she had found with Sean. Sean felt on top of the world, having found the love of his life, and the idea of having children, something he had once given up on, brought him joy. Down the hall, the sounds from Red and Maria's room had quieted, but that thought lingered in Sean's mind. He leaned down to kiss Ava, and she knew exactly what he was thinking. Their moment together was intense, and soon they were wrapped in each other's embrace, their connection growing stronger as time passed. Later, Sean glanced at the clock. "It's almost 5. Let's go take a shower." They walked to the bathroom together, hand in hand, knowing the day ahead would be a long one. As they headed to the summer kitchen to start breakfast, Maria, Red, and Tina arrived, with Tina still trying to wake up. "Good morning," Sean said to the trio as they walked through the door. Red called Tina over to him and whispered something into her ear. Tina left the summer kitchen at a dead run and returned a few minutes later at the same speed. She handed Red a shoebox and then returned to the table and the book she had left there. Red was grinning from ear to ear. "Here, Sean." Red began to pull 4 bottles out of the box. "These are some vitamins that I really do think you need to start taking." Red and Maria were both laughing now, but Red couldn't resist adding, "That, and you really are going to have to learn to pace yourself. You're not as young as you once were, you know." After the laughter had died down, Maria looked around the kitchen wondering how they were going to feed all the girls. "Well, Sean, have you ever fixed breakfast for 17 people?" Maria was smiling as she said it, but she was a little worried. Sean grinned. "It'll be just like it is during shearing, hearty food and a few extras thrown in. It won't be your usual breakfast, but everyone should end up with a full belly." He turned to Maria. "I mixed some masa trigo dough last night. Do you think you could roll out some tortillas?" Sean moved over to the cabinet across from the old wood stove. "Red, can you give me a hand with this countertop?" He opened the cabinet doors and unlatched the top. "Grab that end, and let's take it outside for now." Red wasn't sure why, but he helped out. Once they lifted the top off, it revealed a long, flat metal surface, about 8 feet across. Red noticed the drain holes in the back and realized it was a commercial-style grill. Sean tossed him a wet, soapy rag, and Red got to cleaning while Sean inspected the drip pans. Meanwhile, Ava had just handed Tina a glass of juice when Zara Rodriguez walked in. Tina noticed her first and greeted her cheerfully. "Bom dia." "Good morning." What followed was a friendly early morning conversation, though only half the room understood it. Maria, Tina, and Zara. The rest watched the exchange like a tennis match. At one point, they talked about Tina's ability to speak Portuguese, prompting Zara to say in her best English, "You are a very smart little girl, Tina. You'll have to help me teach the other girls English, okay?" Zara gave Tina a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek, then asked, "What can I do to help?" Sean grabbed a pan and a potato peeler. "Would you mind peeling some potatoes?" Zara smiled, reached for the peeler, and said, "Claro, bonitao." She then turned to the giggling Tina and winked as she began to peel the pile of potatoes in front of her. Maria walked over to Sean and whispered the translation into his ear, and so Ava could hear. When he found out she had simply said, "Sure, good looking," Sean's face went bright red. Ava stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, She's right, you know. Ava started back to what she had been doing, but not before swatting Sean on the butt and saying, "You have a nice butt too." Sean's face took on another 2 or 3 shades of red. Zara leaned out of her chair as though she was trying to get a better look. "Yes, very nice." She gave an exaggerated sigh. "Very nice indeed." Everyone in the kitchen except Sean was laughing. He was simply glowing red and shaking his head. Sean and Red added all of the leaves that he had to the dining room table and got the extra chairs from the closets they had been stored in. He showed Tina where the dishes were, and she and Magda, another of the early rising girls, set the table. When they had finished setting the table, Ava sent Tina down to the bunkhouse where the girls had slept to get the other girls for breakfast. They had used all of the bacon, sausage, and milk Sean and Ava had on hand, as well nearly all the potatoes. About the only thing left in any quantity were pinto beans and masa trigo for tortillas. So it was looking like a trip to town would have to be made after the girls left. Sean hoped the immigration people would treat the girls right, but he didn't have a lot of faith in bureaucrats, state or federal. Jack Rhymes was getting tired of the Sanderson motel. He jokingly thought he was going to sit Sean down and have a talk with him. Ever since he had met Ava there had been trouble, but he had never seen Sean this happy. He stopped and thought for a minute. Wouldn't it be great if he could meet someone like Ava? Then Jack looked around the bare motel room voicing his thoughts. It would make this place feel a lot better if I had someone to come home to. Jack had been on the phone already this morning, and he was sure that Sean was going to be very surprised to find out those 12 girls he rescued were going to be his problem. The INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services policy on OTMs, other than Mexicans, was to issue them a summons to appear before a federal judge and hope they showed. If they didn't show, their attitude was a shrug of the shoulder and go on about their business. So Jack was back on the phone now, as was Dallas, as the two of them tried put together enough food and clothes for the girls. Jack had also arranged with Doc Eller to contact Red to see if there were any medical supplies that were needed. 7 a.m. came, and went as did 8 and 9. The feds were late and getting later. At 10 that morning, Dallas sent Jason out to the Miles Ranch with the food and clothes that they had gathered. Jack decided to go along and take care of the crime scene. He would take the justice of the peace with him and let Jason bring him back. The turnoff for the Miles Ranch was 10 miles east of Sanderson. From the highway, it was 26 long, dusty miles to the ranch house. It was not a trip you can make in a hurry. Between the rough road, push gates, and cattle guards, the trip to the ranch could take an hour and a half. That's if the weather was good. If the weather was bad, you just didn't go. Rainfall on the rocky ground quickly ran off, and flash floods were always a real threat. It had been clear all morning, but a dry line was predicted to move through later that afternoon. A dry line often brought thunderstorms, sometimes nasty ones, and that was what the weather service was predicting for the area this time. Jack knew that he wanted to get to the ranch and get back before it got dark. Waiting for the feds to show had already put that in danger. So Jack left 30 minutes after Jason. At least that way some of the dust would be settled by the time he got there. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, things were going pretty much in a normal sort of way. Stock had to be fed, and there were still a few water gaps that needed mending, but today would be spent waiting on folks to show up. Ava and Maria busied themselves preparing a meal, while Sean took care of a few chores down at the barn. 2 of the girls that had been rescued had grown up on a ranch. Sebastiana Cardoso and Francisca Olivares had followed Sean and Tina down to the barn. As the 2 girls walked along behind Sean and Tina, they were giggling and speaking Portuguese. About every 10th word or so Tina would giggle. Sean had the distinct impression that he was being talked about. The girls insisted that they could and would help him, so, making use of Tina's linguistic skills, Sean showed the girls some jobs they could do. It took them almost no time to finish them, and, after looking around, they found their own work. When Sean finished hitching up the mules, he found Sebastiana and Frankie, as she preferred to be called, mucking out the stalls where he had been keeping Ava's horses. Both had sweat dripping down their faces. Frankie stopped shoveling and nudged Sebastiana, fanning herself with the front of her shirt. Frankie said, "Esta quent." Sean was pretty sure that quent meant hot, as it sounded very much like the Spanish word. The sweat was making the girls' blouses stick to their bodies, highlighting the fact they weren't wearing bras. He chuckled to himself. Yeah, hot in more ways than one. The girls looked at him, and then at each other, not having any idea what he had said. A situation that Tina fixed by translating not only what he said, but adding some to it. Which just went to show she wasn't the innocent little 5-year-old Sean thought she was. She finished her translation, then winked at Sean, causing him to blush. By the time he had made his escape, Sean's face was glowing. "Tina, tell them when they get through to go clean up." He walked out to the wagon, got on, and went to the hay barn for a load of hay. When he returned, Frankie and Sebastiana had just finished with the stalls, so they fell in and helped Sean stack the bales in the loft of the adobe barn. Now the 2 girls were covered with hay to add to the sweat and horse stuff. Sean just smiled. They were pretty good hands. Or was it pretty and good? Come on, girls. Let's go get a cold drink. With that, Frankie and Sebastiana got in the wagon with Tina and Sean, and they rode up to the house. Jason's Explorer and a Suburban from the funeral home in Foot Stockton were parked at the house. Ava, Maria, and the rest of the girls were unloading boxes out of the Explorer, and it appeared to be filled floor to ceiling. "What's all this?" Sean asked, not really sure if he wanted to know. Red was coming out of the house after another load and decided he would answer Sean's question. "Food, clothes, makeup, and feminine hygiene products. Everything you'll need for your new harem, Sean." Frankie and Sebastiana asked Tina something in Portuguese. She responded, and both girls started clapping and saying, "Oh goody, oh goody." In their heavily accented English, they sounded like two charas, a fact not lost on anyone who had heard of Charo, and any thoughts that they might act like her caused more than one smile. Ava had heard all of this, and when she looked at Sean, he simply said, "Dunny, and I will be running away right after lunch." He then tipped his hat, "Ladies," and walked towards the house to wash up. Ava turned to Red. "You know, Ralph, that ain't all that funny." She grabbed another box. "Besides, half of the girls are going home with you." She left Red with his mouth open and wondering what kind of deal Maria had put together without him knowing. Now it really wasn't all that funny. Just as they had finished unloading the Explorer, Jack drove up. Maria greeted him and said, "Lunch is just about ready. Come on in and clean up. Are you going to want tea to drink, Jack?" Jack nodded his head and followed the last of the boxes into the house, but not before taking a look at the sky. He had a bad feeling about the front that was coming through. He hoped that he could get his business taken care of before any storms, either man-made or natural, hit. During lunch, Jack sat next to Zara. At first, he asked about the events of the previous day, but quickly their conversation moved to other topics. Pretty soon it was clear to everyone there that a spark was being kindled. Sean watched the interaction between the two and couldn't help but think that Jack's days as a confirmed bachelor were growing short. Catching Ava's eye, he motioned towards the budding couple. Ava's smile was dazzling. "Jack?" She called to him in a soft, questioning voice. "Are you all right?" Jack looked around the table to find everyone staring at him, and all with a smirk on their faces. Zara blushed and tried to turn her head to hide her face. "What?" Jack stuttered. We're just talking, that's all." With that, the whole table erupted into laughter. After lunch, Jack and the JP, Justice of the Peace, decided to try to drive to the site. Sean didn't like the idea of going in one vehicle. Jack was confident that his four-wheel drive Yukon could make it, but all Sean could think of was how long a walk it was if it didn't. Jack looked at Sean and chuckled. "You are just like the old-time cowboys, aren't you? You think if it can't be done from the back of a horse, it's not worth doing. Would you feel better if we rode over there?" "No." Sean was already put out at all the lollygagging around. "But if we're going to go, let's get. We are burning daylight, and there is going to be a storm this afternoon. I can feel it in my bones." Sean was grumbling and thinking how bad an idea this really was. "I don't guess you got one of those phones like Red has, do you?" Jack was shaking his head. "Yeah, I have one, and I have Red's number programmed in." "Are you happy now?" "No, I'm not happy." Sean looked up at where the sun was in the sky. "It's after 1:30. First thing in the morning, my eye." Jack couldn't help but look at his watch. It was 28 minutes after 1 in the afternoon. He knew Sean hadn't looked at a clock in the house. He was pretty sure there wasn't a clock in the house. When Jack looked at Sean, it was like looking back in time. He hoped that Sean and Ava would have kids. It would be a shame to let that lifestyle die out. Jack checked the emergency supplies he kept in the back of the Yukon and found one of the water jugs to be half empty. He pulled it out and handed it to Sean. "Go fill this up and we can get out of here." Sean kissed Ava goodbye and took longer about it than he normally would have. He just had this nagging feeling that he couldn't shake. Sean didn't fail to notice that Jack and Zara had an extended goodbye session that ended with a friendly kiss, a kiss that evolved rather quickly. Now it was Jack that didn't want to leave, but leave they did. It only took 2 hours and 45 minutes to drive to the bodies with the Yukon, a whole quarter of an hour faster than the wagon. Once there, Sean went over his story showing Jack where they were and where they had fired from. Overnight, a few of the local scavengers had nibbled on the 3 dead coyotes, but not badly. Luckily, the javelinas and the 4-legged coyotes hadn't found them. The JP had checked Cigar Man and Pistol Hider first. When he came to the man that Sean had shot in the crotch, he asked, "Why did you shoot this guy in the balls?" He was holding one of the girls as a hostage and shield. "I figured if I shot him there, he wouldn't be thinking about the girl much." Sean grinned as the JP shivered at the thought of being shot that way. "What were you shooting?" The JP had noticed that the entrance wounds were all quite large with the exception of the one in the back of one of the men. Sean reached down to the gun belt he wore and pulled one of the 45 long Colt cartridges out and handed it to the JP. The JP had interviewed the girls as Jason and the others had unloaded Jason's Explorer, so he knew pretty much what had happened and when. Still, he had to ask, "Why was that?" He pointed to Pistol Hider, Man shot in the back and the front? Sean explained Ava's hand signals and where she was. She simply shot to try to keep me from being hit. The JP knew Sean was a good shot, but as he looked from the hill where Ava was supposed to have shot from, he whistled. That was a pretty good shot to make. Looking at Jack, you say that Mini 14 she shoots is open sights? Jack nodded. She is probably as good a shot as Sean. Jack laughed, then added, she shoots a 9mm for her pistol rather than using a hog leg like Sean here though. Sean cleared his throat. If you two are through, I suggest we get the hell out of here before we get stuck. He pointed to the line of clouds on the horizon. They put the bodies into the body bags Jack had brought, tied them on the luggage rack on top, and hauled it. Jack pushed hard going back to the ranch. His Yukon would definitely need to see Mr. Goodwrench to make things right again. That included some body shop time for the rearranged rear quarter panel. Still, though, they were over a mile from the ranch when the bottom fell out of the clouds. The joke about rainfall in West Texas goes like this. The stranger asks, what's the annual rainfall here? The local responds, 12 to 14 inches. To that the stranger says, that's not very much, is it? Then the local finishes with, you wouldn't think that if you were here the day it happened. There is more truth in that than most want to think about. More often than not, a large percentage, or even multiples of the annual rainfall can come in a 24-hour period. One of the stunning sights in Sanderson is a very large earthen dam. That dam is there because of the Great Sanderson Flood on June the 11th, 1965. A flash flood came through Sanderson Canyon, wiping out whole families and leaving caskets washed out of the cemetery and bodies, both the long dead and the just drowned, up and down Main Street. Flash floods are serious business in West Texas, or anywhere for that matter. Dry creeks and gullies could become raging torrents in a matter of seconds, and the last place you want to be is caught in one of those creek bottoms. Ava had not been idle. With the help of some of the girls, she had cleaned up the 4 other small houses and one large one that at one time or another had been the home of married ranch hands and distant relatives. Next week, these would be where the many guests coming for the wedding would stay. But for now, there were already plenty of guests needing a place to stay. The INS folks showed up at 4 in the afternoon. The man was maybe 5'2" and bookish. The woman, on the other hand, had a very confident air about her. So it was a surprise when the woman said nothing as the man started off being heavy-handed and goonish. He might have stayed that way had not Red made a call. Ava didn't know who was on the other end of the satellite phone call, but when Red handed the phone to the man, he went pale. From that moment on it was, yes sir, no sir, and I'm sorry sir, for the rest of the conversation. The woman stood and watched with a huge smile on her face, and everyone knew there was a story there just waiting to be told. After that, the girls filled out the paperwork, and by 5 the INS man and woman, now smiling even more broadly, were on their way back to town. The woman let the little man go out the door first. Then turning to Red, she said, thanks. Now maybe my complaints will be listened to. Red said he had some connection and he would see what he could do about getting the girls' visas. Ava couldn't help but wonder who was on the other end of that call. Connections indeed. Ava watched the black clouds move in, her spirit reaching out for her lover. Oh, how she wished he was here. There was something foreboding about this storm. Sebastiana and Frankie showed up with little Tina in tow. Sebastiana spoke to Tina, and Tina relayed the message that the 2 girls had shut up the horses and mules in their stalls and had closed the doors to the barn. Ava smiled and hugged them both. In her worrying about Sean, she had completely forgotten all the other important things she needed to have done. She sent the girls off to get cleaned up before the storm hit. Ava kept up her vigil, with Zara joining her watching for any sign of Jack's Yukon. When the rain hit, she knew what the old-timers meant when they said the phrase cloud burst. A blinding flash of lightning was followed immediately by a deafening roll of thunder, and the water came. Quickly, the giant oak and pecan trees disappeared behind a solid wall of water. Ava thought she saw headlights, but it was only for a fraction of a second, and then it was gone. If it hadn't been raining so hard, she might have heard the crash. She did, however, hear something that was out of place. It was a car horn, and it wasn't stopping. It caused a chill to go down her spine. A machine screaming like a banshee at the beginning of a dark, rainy night left Ava with a very bad feeling. She felt empty inside for the first time since she had met Sean. Sean was not happy. Jack's Yukon got halfway up the side of the rain-slick creek bank and stopped. Damn it, Jack, this not the place to be parking. I know. Jack yelled. He threw the SUV into reverse and backed up to the bank on the other side to get a running start. Throwing the Yukon into low, he floored the truck and charged the other side. Don Grimes, JP, was new to the Sanderson area. He had gotten the JP job by appointment when the old one, Delbert Masterson, died of a heart attack. In the fall, he would have to run for the office. As he listened to Sean, it sounded like he was scared, and that seemed strange, to say the least. Then he heard it. What a strange sound, he thought. Hey guys, do you hear that? Hear what? Jack's voice was as strange Sean's. Don laughed. Well, there for a minute, I thought I heard a train. If Don was going to say anything else, the wall of water that hit the Yukon broadside stopped him. In less than a heartbeat, being inside the Yukon was a lot like being in a washing machine. The horn was blowing and wouldn't shut off. The left rear window shattered as what looked one of the water gaps, a 3-inch cedar post with 3 or 4 feet of barbed wire on it, shot into the rear area of the SUV along with gallons of muddy water. The Yukon was barrel rolling down the creek bed. Sean, out of habit, had his seatbelt on. Jack and Don, however, didn't, and as the SUV rolled, their hands and feet flailed around the inside of the Yukon. Water was coming in, but before there was enough to stop Jack's flailing body, his foot came flying at Sean's head. Suddenly, Sean had something other than a taste of the muddy water in his mouth. First came the smoky taste of a broken tooth, followed by the coppery taste of blood. Suddenly, the Yukon stopped, and when it did, the cold water began to pour in. Sean was hanging from his seat. The strain on the seat belt was such that the buckle would not release. Sean reached for the map lights on the ceiling, hoping they would still work. When he turned them both on, Sean could see Jack floating face down in the water. Looking over his shoulder, he saw Don face down as well, but he was in the process of floating out the broken window in the rear of the SUV. Sean's head was a little foggy. He knew he had to get out, and he had to get Jack out. Sean was reached for his hunting knife to cut the seat belt. Just as he cut the belt, something hit the bottom of the SUV, and it started moving again. Sean grabbed Jack and was almost out of the vehicle when something hit him, and everything went black. Ava was standing on the porch that went all the way around the house. She could faintly hear the horn, and once she thought she saw a headlight. But strangely, it was going in a circle. She had a very bad feeling. A great loss was very close. Something bad was happening, and she was powerless to stop it. Suddenly, it felt was as though her very soul was leaving. Maria had just walked out on the porch to ask if Ava or Zara would like some tea when Ava screamed, "No," and took off running into the rain-blackened night. 1 minute Ava had been standing on the porch. The next she was running into the dark, rainy night, screaming at the top of her lungs. It scared Maria senseless, but only for a second or two, then she yelled into the house. That yell brought Red, Tina, the girls, and Dallas, who had led the INS folks in and had stayed so he could talk to the JP. Zara turned to Maria and started crying uncontrollably, and not even Zara knew why for sure. Maria quickly explained what had happened. Dallas and Red grabbed flashlights. Red picked up his medical bag. As they were headed out the door, Dallas spotted Sean's new poly lariat on the coat stand by the door. Thinking it might come in handy, he took it with him. Dallas and Red then took off in the direction that Maria had last seen Ava going. A few minutes later, they heard her calling out. Ava did not know what the feeling was that had passed over her. It could have been death itself for all she knew. What she did know was that it felt like her heart was being pulled out of her chest, as though the last ounce of love she had left was being pulled away from her. The only thing that could mean, as far as she was concerned, was that Sean was hurt and maybe dying, and she could not let that happen. She ran as fast as her feet would carry her, screaming out his name as she went. Strangely, it was easy to know where to go. It was as though someone was guiding her. If she started going in the wrong direction, the strange feeling got weaker. The distant roar of the creek grew louder as she got closer. But there was another sound that she didn't understand. Clicking. Soft clicks buried in the sound of the rushing water, and loud clicks, their sound out of place. Sean's hand was looped through Jack's gun belt, and he was holding on as though his own life depended on it rather than Jack's. A piece of cholla propelled by the water hit Sean in the side of the face. The burning was intense as his body reacted to the crude steroid in the paper-like covering of the spines. The locals called it jumping cholla because of its habit of sticking in the back of your boot only to be flung into your butt by the act of walking. Now the floodwaters were sending them through the water by the dozens, along with every other kind of thorn-covered vegetation known to West Texas. Sean knew he had to get out of the water. Every second he and Jack were in the water increased their risk of being pinned against something and drowned. Sean also knew not to put his feet down as his waterlogged boots and jeans tried to sink. If his feet went down, they could catch in the brush or even barbed wire from a washed-out fence or a water gap. He kicked his feet as hard as he could, struggling to swim with one arm and carry Jack with the other. Going through his mind along with all the dangers was his love for Ava. His muscles were on fire, and he was tired and cold, but his love for Ava pushed him for the side of the creek that he knew had to be there. Back at the house, Portuguese was flying through the air at a blistering rate. Maria realized she had to do something to take their minds and hers off of whatever it was that was going on outside. Quickly, she divided the girls up into groups, sending some to look for blankets, while sending others to make hot tea and chocolate. She saw 2 of the girls make the sign of the cross, and for a second thought it a bit funny given Sean and Ava's beliefs. But if the saying, any port in a storm were true, then any god or goddess in a storm was just as true. Maria walked back out on the porch. There Zara and the youngest of the girls, Ziva, joined her as they kept a silent vigil. Ava realized that she was moving slowly downstream as she followed the feeling. Sean, where are you? She screamed into the blackness. Behind Ava, Red and Dallas moved towards her screams. Sometimes the roar of the water completely masked her calls, but they had heard enough to know she was calling for Sean. What they didn't know, nor could they figure out, was why she was running through the night calling his name. They could not imagine how she could have seen anything from the house with the weather like it was. Still, they felt like they needed to catch up with her before she got hurt herself. Sean was exhausted. He started thinking he wasn't going to make it. He thought about letting Jack go, but he just couldn't do it. Surviving at the cost of another's life was a price he couldn't live with. He had to get out of the water. He knew how to be close, but the current was so strong. Suddenly he felt it, mud right in front of him. He took a chance and put his feet down so he could push Jack up on the bank. He'd almost made it when a floating mass of prickly pear pads and cholla hit him in his side, knocking him and Jack down. Another of the cholla hit him in the face across the bridge of his nose and eyebrow. Sean was struggling to get a breath of air from this last knockdown when suddenly he and Jack went over a 6-foot-plus drop. The only good thing about their fall was that Sean now knew where he was, and when he and Jack washed out of the deep pool at the bottom of the waterfall, Sean was able to get them both to the bank. He used the last of his strength to push Jack up out of the water. Sean knew that they needed to get further away from the creek, but he just didn't know how he was going to do it. His head hurt so badly that he was dizzy. Then nothing. Ava was getting closer. She could feel it. A lightning flash arced through the sky, and there, directly in front of her, was Sean. Her Sean, his face all bloody, cholla spines in his ear and around his eyes. The prickly pear pads had left thousands of their tiny hair like glocked spines that would almost be impossible to get out. She ran to him and pulled him into her lap. Sean, wake up, baby. You can't leave me. A few yards away, Red and Dallas were still moving towards the creek, but Ava's calls had stopped. So now they called, Ava, where are you? Over here, she screamed, trying to be heard over the roar of the creek. Over here, Sean's hurt bad. Red and Dallas ran to Ava's side, and Red started checking Sean and Jack out. Red turned to Ava, go up to the house and get Sean's truck. But when Red saw the look on her face, he knew that wasn't going to be the way it was going to happen, and so did Dallas. I'll go, Dallas said, and he left, heading back to the house as fast as he could. Red pulled another flashlight out of his bag and handed it to Ava. Here, take this and these forceps, and start pulling those spines out of him. Leave those glockids alone till we get him to the house. With that, he turned and started checking out Jack. Jack was in much worse shape than Sean. His arm was broken, as were several of his ribs, but the worst of it was the huge bump on his head. Red was very worried about a concussion. Dallas' arrival back at the house was the cause of a million questions, but he waved them off and grabbed Sean's truck and headed back to the creek. Dallas got as close as he dared with the truck, leaving the headlights trained on Red and Ava. Red worried about moving either man, but the creek was still rising, and they were going to have to do something quick. Red sent Dallas to look in Sean's truck for anything that could be used as a backboard. Finding some of the 1-inch thick corral lumber Sean had been using to make fence repairs, Dallas was able to cobble together something Red could live with. Hopefully Jack could too. It was over an hour later that Red, Dallas, and Ava managed to get the bruised, battered, and bleeding Sean and Jack back to the ranch house. When they did get there, it was nothing short of bedlam, with more than one of the 12 Brazilian girls saying, Meu Deus. All of the girls were concerned for Sean. After all, he and Ava had been the ones to rescue them. But for Zara, the pain was compounded. When Jack Rhymes had interviewed Zara that morning, something had clicked between them. What began as a formal interview had naturally turned into a heartfelt conversation between two people who were both quietly longing for connection. Now, the man Zara had begun to deeply admire just hours earlier was lying unconscious, tied to a makeshift stretcher made from corral lumber, and he looked barely alive. Maria quickly took charge, assigning everyone tasks to help the injured. One of the first was to get Ava into dry clothes, and Sebastiana and Frankie took care of that, despite Ava's complaints. Maria then asked Zara to fetch a change of clothes for Red and Dallas from her room. It was the only request refused. Zara looked at Maria with pleading eyes and said, Please let me stay with Jack. It was the first time anyone noticed the bond forming between her and the Texas Ranger. Soon after, Red and Dallas had placed Sean into a bed. Ava and Maria helped prepare him so Red could tend to his wounds once he was finished caring for Jack, whose condition was more serious. Red handed a pair of heavy-duty shears to Zara. Start cutting his clothes off, including the boots. Zara went to work quickly but gently, all the while murmuring to Jack words that even to Red's linguistically challenged ears sounded like terms of affection. Red and Zara cut away Jack's clothes, and Red started his examination. Jack's breathing was labored, and after getting his shirt off, the reason was fairly plain to see. It looked like at least 3 ribs on his left side were broken, and his lung had collapsed. In a few minutes, Red had a chest tube in, and Jack's lung inflated. Jack's breathing immediately eased. Zara had by now positioned herself by Jack's head, and was busying herself running her fingers through his hair and giving him small kisses on his face. Red's concern only deepened when Jack remained unconscious when he put in the chest tube. He finished checking Jack out and knew he had to get help here fast. What he didn't know was how they were going to get that help and get it in time. Moving to the room where Sean was lying, Red did his examination. Sean was not in as bad a shape as Jack, but he was pretty sure Sean had a concussion. Other than that, most of Sean's injuries were cuts, bruises, and cactus spines. He did have a bad gash on the side of his head that he would have to stitch up, but first he had to get Jack to a trauma center. Red's call started things rolling. The problem was the storm. It had stalled out. Right now it was just adding more water to already swollen creeks, gullies, and draws. It could be days before the ranch would be accessible by a vehicle if the rain washed out the road, which left only a helicopter capable of reaching the ranch. Del Rio, Texas. Red's call had interrupted the sleep of folks from Austin to Washington, D.C. A Black Hawk helicopter belonging to one of Homeland Security's many groups sat on the tarmac at Laughlin Air Force Base. On board, a flight surgeon and nurse waited for the pilot to be cleared for takeoff. It was the third time that night that they had loaded up and warmed up the helicopter. Twice they'd had to stand down because of the weather. Flight surgeon Captain Amy Carson had talked to Dr. Deming and knew that the Texas Ranger was in bad shape. In trauma, doctors always talk about the golden hour. The Ranger's hour had started last night at 8 p.m. It was now 10 minutes after 9. His golden hour was over 12 hours old. The helicopter had a range of 315 nautical miles on internal fuel tanks, and the ranch was over 200 miles one way as the crow flies. The problem was that as the crow flies went through Mexican airspace, and that was always a complication. So they would be taking the long way to the ranch. In the end, the helicopter had been equipped with 2 230-gallon external tanks, but with the headwinds they would be stretching the fuel to the very limit, and every minute that they sat there with the engines running they lost more of their margin of safety. The pilot called in once more for permission to take off. When it was not forthcoming, he started shutting down so the tanks could be topped off. Damn it, Amy did not want to take a long ride to pick up a dead body. The fact that they had been up all night was adding to their stress. The ground crew came out and refueled the helicopter as another hour passed. Suddenly, Captain Carson's headset crackled. "We are clear. Radar says it's as good as it is going to get," the pilot said over the intercom. Captain Carson looked around the inside of the Black Hawk, wishing this was one of the UH-60Q medevac units. Oh well, she said to herself, maybe after this the powers that be would see how badly they needed one in this area. The blades on the helicopter were picking up speed, and moments later they were airborne and westward bound. Zara had not left Jack's side. From the looks of her the next morning, she hadn't slept either. When Red came in at 6, she looked at the doctor and shook her head negatively as a tear followed a well-worn track down her face. "Can you stay here just a minute?" she asked in her heavily accented voice. Red nodded his head. "Sure, take all the time you need." Zara rushed across the hall to the bathroom, and in just a few minutes she returned to the chair where she had spent the night. Maria came in later and tried to convince her to go eat some breakfast, but she refused to leave. Maria gave in and had Isabel take her a tray. Zara ate while she watched over Jack. In Sean's room, it had been a long night as well. It was a full hour before he regained consciousness. At first he was confused and combative, but Ava was able to calm him quickly by smothering him in kisses. This in spite of Red's objections. Maria seemed to be everywhere. Rafaela and Olivia, the 2 girls who had been assaulted, still needed comforting, although they did seem to latch on to Sean's recovery. They had done for Sean and Ava pretty much the same thing Zara had done for Jack. The differences being Zara was obviously in love with Jack. Red watched as Sean slowly shook the cobwebs out of his head and returned to normal. So much so that by 6 a.m. that morning he was champing at the bit to go and take care of his chores. And if Red thought he was combative before, telling Sean he couldn't go do what he knew needed to be done was the cause of a major battle. In the end, the solution was simple. Ava put her foot down. Sebastiana and Frankie went to take care of the chores as they had the previous afternoon when Sean had been gone with Jack and the JP. Dallas and James Dyers, the man from the Foot Stockton funeral home, had left the house at first light riding 2 of Sean's horses and leading 4 others with pack saddles on them, searching for the missing JP as well as the bodies of the 3 coyotes. They found the Yukon, but none of the bodies were still tied to the top. They did find Justice of the Peace Don Grimes' body, and they carefully loaded it on to one of the pack saddles and secured it. About a half a mile further downstream, they found two of the coyotes' bodies, but as one of them was on the other side of the still raging creek, they passed on recovering it until later. After riding 2 more miles downstream and not finding the third body, they decided to go back upstream with their search. And sure enough, 500 yards upstream from the Yukon, they found the body of the third coyote. They secured him on a horse and started back to the ranch house. It was a little before 10, and the sound of a helicopter could be heard as it flew up the valley towards the ranch house. Sean looked like he had tried to fight his way out of a sack of wild cats. There were very few places on his body that weren't scratched, scraped, cut, or bruised. The next morning, when he got up to go to the bathroom, he felt like he was 100 years old. Ava helped him dress when it was clear there would be no keeping him in bed. By the time he had made it to the breakfast table, Sebastiana and Frankie had already fed and taken care of the livestock. Once again, he thought about hiring the girls. He would have to talk to Ava about that before he forgot. But right now he was filled with worry over his friend Jack. Zara had stayed by Jack's side all night. It was plain for anybody to see that the girl was madly in love and scared to death of losing that love. Sean, with Ava's help, moved to the east side of the porch to soak up some of the morning sun. That's where he was sitting when he heard the sound of a helicopter coming up the valley towards the ranch house. 10 minutes later, the blades of the Black Hawk were coasting to a stop. Red had waited on the porch until the pilot had shut down the engines. He then walked out to meet the flight surgeon. He had talked to Captain Carson several times during the night, and he was anxious to put a face with the voice he had heard. Amy Carson knew of Dr. Deming. Red was famous on both sides of the river from Del Rio to El Paso. He had brought medical care to hundreds who lived in the remote areas. In many ways, he was the kind of doctor that Amy wanted to be when she retired from the Air Force. They met halfway between the hello and the house, and Red started briefing her on his patients. Seeing Sean on the porch, they went to him first. When it was clear that they would need Ava to get him to cooperate, they drafted her, and soon Sean was back undressed and unhappy, as the two doctors poked, prodded, and exchanged comments in Latin and doctorese. For Sean, the good news was that his concussion was a mild one, and he showed every sign that he would heal quickly. Jack, on the other hand, was in bad shape. Captain Carson had taken one look at him and ordered the flight nurse to start prepping him to be flown out. One of the things that Amy had noticed when she was examining Jack was the young Brazilian girl who never got very far away. When Amy stepped out of the room to talk to Red, she asked, "What's the deal with the girl?" Red chuckled. "It appears that she and Jack fell in love yesterday. I hope that you will consider taking her. She'll be a lost puppy here without Jack." Amy knew it was against the rules, but considering the state of her love life, she was not about to sabotage anyone else's. When they walked back into the room, Amy looked at the girl. "Miss, what's your name?" Zara stood and walked towards the lady doctor. "My name is Zara Rodriguez." Amy smiled at her, trying to put her at ease, but not succeeding. "Can you go with us and help to nurse him back to where he needs to be?" Zara's face absolutely lit up the whole room as she finished the last few steps towards Amy and wrapped her arms around her. "Yes. Oh yes. Just tell me what to do," Zara said, her voice choked with emotion as she began to cry. Amy held the young woman, patting her on the back as she sobbed out her happiness and the tension from not knowing what would happen to her or her new love. Amy broke the embrace and turned to Ava. "Can you help her get some clothes together so she can go with us?" Ava knew it was a very special thing the lady doctor was doing. "Sure. Come on, Zara, let's get ready to go." 15 minutes later, Zara walked beside the gurney to which Jack was strapped, headed for the helicopter that would take her and Jack to a place where he could get better. She held his hand so he would know that she was there. Zara knew that Jack would get better. She simply would not allow any other thought. He would get well, they would marry, and she would have his baby. It had all been worked out the first time they had laid eyes on each other, and although she was worried now, she knew it would be all right. She had seen it in Jack's eyes. It had to be true. In the helicopter, Zara was shown where to sit and handed a headphone set. Amy made a point of making her feel welcome. From what she had seen, this young lady might very well be the key to Jack making a full recovery. If Jack felt about her the way she felt about him, he would be in a big hurry to get out and about. Sean watched as his friend was taken away. After they were away, he looked at Ava. "You need to call Jake and tell him what happened." Ava looked at Sean, thinking maybe he was hurt worse than Red thought. "Jake, the bartender where I used to work?" "Why?" she asked. "Have you not noticed the tattoo on Jake's right wrist?" Sean quizzed. "The circle with the 7 in it?" Ava watched as Sean nodded his head. They were on the same SEAL team. "They are closer than brothers. He'll want to know," Sean told her. Ava smiled at Sean. "I'll go see if Red will let me make a call." Ava left Sean sitting on the porch in the sun and went to find Red. After finding him and making the call, she returned to find Sean fast asleep in the old wooden rocker. She sat down beside him and watched him sleep. In Lubbock, Jake was calling his boss, Don Grossman. As soon as Jake told him that he had a team member down, Don was sending him on his way. He understood the bond of team members. As he hung up the phone, he looked down at the cartoon character tattooed on his forearm, and it reminded him he needed to make a few phone calls himself. 30 minutes later, Jake had thrown the bag that he always kept packed on the floorboard of his classic 1976 Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40 and started down the long highway to Del Rio, Texas to check on his teammate. That Jack was hurt was a concern. If Ava was right and he was in love, then that would be a curiosity. Sean awoke to the gentle caress of Ava's hand. "Wake up, sweetie, we have some lunch ready." It took 2 tries for Sean to get up, and when he did, he really wanted to sit back down. The pain was unbelievable. It was also all over. If there was a single square inch of Sean's body that didn't hurt, he couldn't find it. He walked towards the dining room at a snail's pace, stopping every few feet to take a deep breath. His forehead was beating up with sweat. Finally, he stopped and collapsed into a chair in the hallway. He was not quite halfway to the dining room. Ava went to get Red. She had tears in her eyes. "He needs something for the pain, Red. Please. You ready to stop hurting now?" Red looked at his stubborn patient. Sean had turned down the pain medication earlier that morning. Turning to Maria, "Go get that syringe I filled earlier. There's a prep pad, Band-Aid, and a tourniquet with it." Maria returned and gave everything to Red. Red rolled up Sean's sleeve and put the tourniquet on his arm and used the prep pad to clean the site. Red slipped the needle into Sean's vein and slowly began to inject the medicine. "What is that, Red?" Sean asked. "It feels like the pain is just melting away." "It's called Buprenex. That Air Force doctor left it for you. She said it would take care of the pain without causing you to have that high feeling that comes with the opiates." Red had finished injecting the medicine in and put the Band-Aid on. "How do you feel now?" Sean smiled. "Let's go eat." Sean got up and started to the dining room. He was still moving slow, but the pain relief was plain to see. And Red, seeing that, said, "Don't get the idea that you can waltz down to the barn and go to work." Red chuckled as he saw Sean's shoulders visibly slump at the news. After lunch, Dallas left to see if the creek had run down enough that the last body could be recovered. It was, in a little after 3 p.m., James Dyers left with 4 bodies in the back of his Suburban, with Dallas following him. 2 hours later, Dallas called Red to let him know that the roads had not washed out too badly, and they could get out if they needed to. Captain Amy Carson looked at the results of the last set of tests that had been run. Things were looking up for the Texas Ranger. He had come to in the helicopter on the trip to Del Rio. Zara had been the first to notice Jack's return when he moved the hand she was holding. Amy had been watching the girl, and suddenly her face lit up like a searchlight. She undid her seatbelt and was on her knees kissing Jack's face and crying. He smiled and said, "I must have died. I'm seeing an angel." Zara was trying to shush him and ask him if he was hurting. She kept saying, "It's all right. I take care of you now." Jack smiled. That would be real nice, for a change. He faded in and out for the rest of the trip, but it looked a lot better for the Ranger. A lot better in more ways than one. 3 days after the accident, Sean still felt like he'd been pushed to his limits. Every muscle in his body ached as if they'd been pounded with a baseball bat. And if the pain wasn't bad enough, sitting around doing nothing was driving him crazy. The first day after the accident, pain was the biggest issue. Red shots helped. But by the second day, it felt like every muscle in his body was locked up. He'd never been so stiff and sore, and it didn't seem to improve. The trouble was, he had an important appointment with the love of his life and a priest. If it hadn't been for Sebastiana and Frankie doing the work, Sean would have been worried sick. The 2 women seemed to thrive on the ranch chores, laughing as they worked. By the second day of Sean being out of action, the women were asking him to let them stay and become his new hired hands. That decision would have to come from Ava, though. It was one Sean wasn't comfortable making on his own. Ava had watched the interplay between Sean, Frankie, and Sebastiana. It was obvious that he couldn't treat them like one of the guys simply because they weren't one of the guys. Sean just wasn't wired that way. The 2 women teased him unmercifully, and Sean squirmed under their torment. Ava knew that they had an effect on his libido as she had had to relieve the pressure several times after their teasing. She might have been jealous of the 2 women if not for the fact that it was very plain that Sean was refusing every advance by the 2. Then there was the day when Maria showed up with Sebastiana and Frankie in tow. All of the girls had made a real effort to learn English, and with Maria helping them, Frankie and Sebastiana had explained how they felt. Ava had been surprised to find out that Sebastiana and Frankie were lovers. They also loved her and Sean, but that love was like that of a brother and sister. They worried that Sean took some of their teasing as flirting, and through Maria, they explained how they could never betray the 2 people that they owed their lives to. Ava had to stop their talk in order to go get Sean, so he could hear what they had to say. 30 minutes later, the Miles Ranch had its first female hired hands, and Sean and Ava had 2 women who really cared for them working with them. News of Jack's recovery cheered up everyone at the ranch. He would need at least a month to heal. Jack wanted to spend that month at the Miles Ranch, and he wanted Zara to be there with him. It only took a few calls and a hospital bed was brought to the ranch and set up in one of the guest rooms. Captain Carson wanted to keep him a week, but she surrendered after 3 days. Monday morning, Jack and Zara were loaded on to the same helicopter that had brought them to Del Rio. Now it took them back to a place that would always be magic for the two of them. The Miles Ranch would always be the place where Jack and Zara first met. Jake Dingle had, for some reason, decided to stay in Del Rio till Friday. He would then travel to the Miles Ranch to see Sean and Ava get married, and by a strange coincidence, he would be bringing a date. As the week played out, preparations for the wedding were in full swing. Sean's dad had made panels that turned the shearing shed into a 25-foot by 40-foot screened-in pavilion. With a bundle of corral lumber, a bunch of metal sawhorse brackets, and some 2x4s, Red and the girls, with Sean's supervision, built long tables. Sean's mother had several very large pots. On Friday, they would be filled with pinto beans. Simon had sent some of his AG students out to the Miles Ranch with the big trailer-mounted barbecue. So a place to cook and a place to eat were ready. The next big chore was one Sean had been dreading. Crawling up on Dunny so he, Ava, Sebastiana, and Frankie could go gather the livestock that they were going to kill for the barbecue. Among the sheep and goats on the Miles Ranch were 2 meat breeds. Dorpers are a hardy sheep breed developed in South Africa, and Sean's dad thought that they would be the future for mutton production in the U.S. They had done okay, but they hadn't really taken off like the Boer goats had. Boers were to the goat industry what Dorpers were to the sheep industry, and, like the Dorper, the Boer was developed in South Africa, and therefore they handled the arid heat of West Texas very easily. Sean and his 3 lady wranglers took off at first light to find and bring back a few head. By late afternoon, they had rounded up enough that they could choose the ones they wanted to sacrifice for the wedding feast. For Sean it had been a test of sorts. First to see how badly it hurt to sit a horse, and second to see how his future wife and his 2 new hands did handling stock. One of the first things the 2 new hands had to learn was how to handle a gun, specifically his dad's and uncle's old .45 long Colts. Since Frankie was the smaller of the 2, she got his dad's gun and holster, and Sebastiana got his uncle's, after the belt was modified to fit her much smaller waist. Sean's uncle had been a big fan of eating, and his 50-inch waist had showed his passion, a passion that had killed him in the end. The girls didn't have to be told why the guns were needed, but Sean thought they would get a kick when they saw the other reason to carry a pistol when gathering sheep and goats. They rode to the end of the pasture where the Dorps and Boers were kept, then spread out, and started working their way back to the house. As they rode into a small valley, they found most of the Dorps and a good many of the Boers. The problem was that the Boers were up near the rim of the mesa that formed the wall of the valley. Sean rode up as high as he could get with Dunny, then pulled out his pistol and fired a round into the rocks behind the Boers. Just like they knew what they were supposed to be doing, they started running along the trail at the top of the mesa. Sean eased them along, only having to shoot up behind them a couple of times to prod them along. When they reached the end of the trail, they started down the hill and joined with the Dorps that Ava and the girls had been moving along, with Sebastiana and Frankie on one flank. The fence that ended at the ranch house making the other flank, and Sean and Ava pushing them, they drove the mixed herd of sheep and goats to the corrals at the ranch house. Just as they were getting up to the corrals, one of the Boers decided to make a break for it. Sean watched in awe as Frankie spurred her horse after the escaping goat, while Sebastiana turned her horse to face the herd and used her mount to keep the rest from following. When he looked up at Frankie, she was twirling something above her head, then just as suddenly she released it. The runaway goat went crashing to the ground as Frankie rode up, stepped off her horse, and finished tying the front legs of the goat. She then hefted the goat up on the neck of her horse and rode back to where they had stopped the herd and were waiting on her. She had a smile that made Sean feel warm all over, and when he looked over to Ava, she was smiling as well. The rest of the drive was uneventful, and after Sean had closed the gate on the herd, he had to ask what it was Frankie had used on the runaway. The day that Ava and Sean had told them they could stay and work on the ranch, they had asked for some rawhide. Sean had given it to them and had not thought any more about it. He was reminded of it when he asked Frankie what she had thrown, using hand gestures mimicking what he'd see her do, and the girls showed him the bolos they had made. Sean was duly impressed. He pointed to the bolos and asked Vaca, "Cow?" The girls laughed and said, "Yes, cow, no problem." He had to laugh. Just about everything that he asked the girls was, "Yes, no problem." "Come on," he told them, "let's go catch a steer." He had a particular steer in mind. In fact, it was one he had in the house pasture just for putting in the freezer. So the 4 of them set off to catch the steer before supper. Sean pointed to Ava, then said to the girls, "Watch this." Turning to Ava, he asked, "Head or heel?" Ava got a 1,000-megawatt smile and said heel. Sean pointed to a bald-faced steer, and the two of them spurred their horses into a run after it. The steer quickly realized its fate and took off. Sean expertly swung a loop, catching the steer's short horns, then dallied off and began turning him, setting him up for Ava. Ava dropped the reins onto her horse's neck, using her knees to guide her mount into the turn after the steer. She threw the loop, wrapping it around the steer's back legs. Once she saw the throw was good, she yanked the slack out of the rope and dallied off, stretching the steer's legs straight out behind him and bringing him to a stop. Glancing over at Sebastiana and Frankie, Sean saw the same smile he had when Frankie had caught the runaway. Turning to Ava, he said, "I think we need to enter the roping in San Angelo this year." Ava's response. She just beamed. Sean thought he might have seen a tear, but it was hard to tell. Ava let her rope go slack, and the steer shook off the loop. Sean called to her, "Throw a loop on his horns. We'll guide him back to the house." Ava roped the steer, dallied off, making sure her fingers didn't get between the rope and the saddle horn, and then they started on the short trip back to the house. The steer must have had an idea what was in store for him as he fought all the way back to the house. When they finally got him there, they put him in a corral by himself. There he would wait till Friday when he and the goats and sheep they had picked out would be slaughtered for the big day. It had been a long, hard day at a pretty fast pace, and when Sean finally did slow down, he hurt, and bad. He and Ava grabbed a couple of towels and headed to the solar showers. The solar showers were something that Sean had put together when he spotted an oil field chemical salesman with a trailer load of black plastic barrels that would each held 55 gallons of water. Sean was able to talk the man out of 10 of the barrels. When Sean explained to Simon what he wanted to do, Simon volunteered his AG students help in building an overhead rack that would hold the barrels so that gravity would supply the water pressure. In the end, 6 of the barrels were mounted on a frame made out of 2.5-inch pipe. The 6 barrels held over 300 gallons of hot water, when it was sunny, of course. And when wasn't it sunny in West Texas? Sean and Ava had just turned the water on when Sebastiana and Frankie came to join them. Sebastiana smiled timidly at Ava and said, "Is okay?" Ava was watching Sean closely when she replied, "Yes, come on." She motioned the girls into the shower. It was not like it was crowded or anything. There were 3 shower heads for the 8-foot square shower area. Sean's erection, brought on by Ava as soon as they were in the shower, eased under the force of his embarrassment, but when Sebastiana and Frankie brought their naked bodies into sight, it returned with a vengeance. It looked like Sean was going to have a hard time overcoming his shyness. Then Ava got that funny little look on her face, and the corner of her mouth got that little wrinkle in it. Sean had seen it before over the last 2 weeks, and he quickly played those times over in his mind. It hit him like a ton of bricks, but before he could open his mouth to say anything, Ava called the girls over. "Come on," she said, "let's clean him up good." Frankie squealed with delight, grabbed the big loofah, and soaped it up. Sebastiana took the shampoo and started on Sean's hair. They stayed till the last drop of water ran out of the 6 barrels. There was nothing really sexual about it, but at the same time the 4 of them found that they were forming a bond. Where that would lead, no one knew or cared. Thursday finally came around, bringing with it some of the wedding guests. Sarah and Josh, Ava's best friend and her boyfriend, were taking Friday as a Rhodes Scholar Day. We're also bringing down Mrs. Logan, the neighbor lady that had befriended Ava, and Sandra Smith, her daughter. It seemed like there were a million things left to do. Ava just hoped that they would all be done. Sean, Sebastiana, and Frankie had left right after breakfast with instructions not to look for them. All they would tell Ava was that it was a surprise, and she would find out Saturday. Jack Rhymes was enjoying being out of the hospital. For one thing, the food was better. Jack and Zara spent most of their waking hours talking, and what they had found out was that they were very much in love. Thursday morning, Jack ventured out of the bed for the first time. Zara helped him walk to the front porch where the 2 of them sat enjoying the warm spring morning. They were talking to Tina when Jack caught the reflection of a windshield on the hill above the house. Jack smiled at Tina and said, "Tina, run tell Ava that someone is coming." Tina left at her normal speed, which meant she was returning only a minute or so later. Ava walked out on the porch. "Jack, did you see someone?" Sunlight reflecting off a windshield. "They're on the second hill on the road coming in. Who were you expecting?" Jack asked. "Well," Ava started, "Sarah and Josh, with Mrs. Logan and her daughter, but they weren't going to leave Lubbock till 7 a.m. That can't be them." Jack figured it was someone who was supposed to be coming down that road, but just to be safe, he sent Zara after his pistol and binoculars. Ava stepped back into the house and moved her Ruger Mini 14 to stand right by the door. It was several minutes later that they saw a vehicle top the hill to descend into the valley. Jack was watching through the binoculars and recognized the bright yellow Land Cruiser. "It's Jake." "Jake Dingle?" Ava exclaimed. "I thought you said he was staying in Del Rio till Friday." Jack shrugged his shoulders. a move he immediately regretted as the pain from the broken ribs almost made him pass out. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead, and his breath got very short. Zara scolded him. Not that the ribs hadn't already extracted a steep penalty. Tina showed up with a syringe full of medicine, which Jack gladly accepted. They watched as Jake's car came through the valley to the house. Jake pulled up to the house and got out. Ava was off the porch and out the front gate in a flash. "Jake," she squealed, "I'm so glad you're here." Jake grabbed Ava by the waist and lifted her up above his head. "I wouldn't miss this for nothing, little bit." He brought Ava back down to the ground, but gave her a kiss on the cheek. "Come here, I want you to meet someone." Ava looked at the woman getting out of the other side of Jake's vehicle. "Dr. Carson, it's good to have you back," Ava called out. Ava walked over to the doctor and gave her a hug. "Rumor has it that you and that gorilla over there," Ava turned and pointed at Jake, "have fallen for each other." Ava grinned as Jake's face turned bright red. Ava turned to Amy Carson. "You will be staying till the wedding, won't you?" Jake spoke up. "I have my camping gear in here if you don't have enough room." "Nonsense," Ava giggled. "I'm not going to let you sleep in the house, but I'm sure not going to let you sleep in the yard. Come on, there's a spare bedroom in the yellow house." Ava started down the walk to the yellow house, then stopped and turned back to Jake and Amy. "Were you two going to want separate rooms?" Jake was still blushing and apparently was having a hard time finding his tongue, so Amy spoke up for him, laughing. "No, one bed is fine. We can share." Then winking at Ava, she continued, "I have already found out he is too cheap to get a motel." Jack had been sitting on the porch with a huge smile on his face, straining to keep from laughing, but the effect on Jake from the comment Amy made had everyone laughing. Well, everyone but Jake, and he looked like he wanted to get back in his car and leave. Instead, he grabbed the bags and walked along behind Ava and Amy, looking a lot like a whipped puppy. Lunch was running late, and as it worked out, that was a good thing. Sarah and Josh showed up a little after 1 p.m. Ava ushered them into the dining room table and told Tina to call Sean and the girls into lunch. Tina couldn't hold the iron bar that the adults used to ring the triangle that hung from the summer kitchen porch. In fact, she couldn't even reach it. But she enjoyed ringing the bell so much that a small step ladder had been set up for her to climb, and a hammer hung in place of the iron bar. Tina climbed the ladder and gave the triangle a good working over. Down at the hay barn, Sebastiana, Frankie, and Sean heard the dinner bell and went to work getting the black polish off their hands so they wouldn't give away their secret. For the last week, the three of them had taken every spare minute to clean and polish the handmade carriage and its harness that one of his forefathers had brought from England. Every year, the Miles men had always carefully maintained all of the horse-drawn vehicles. This year, the carriage was getting special treatment, but then it was going to have a special task come Saturday. The polish took time to get off, so the three of them had to run to keep from being late for lunch. Sean was surprised to see Jake and the Air Force doctor sitting at the table. Jake, on the other hand, saw something he didn't like in how Sean and the two women he came in with were acting. He looked to Ava and saw no concern. If Sean was doing Ava wrong, Jake felt compelled to straighten him out. His feelings weren't helped when Ava asked what Sean and the girls had been doing, and he wouldn't tell her. What Jake didn't know was that this had become a game that Ava had been playing with Sean and the girls. She'd ask, and they would refuse to answer, but it was all in fun. Jake wasn't having fun. Lunch was lively. Sean was introduced to Mrs. Logan and her daughter Sandra. After lunch, Sean, Sebastiana, and Frankie were heading back to the hay barn to finish up on the carriage when Jake stopped them and demanded to know what was going on. Ava and Jack had both seen Jake storm out and had followed, Ava going straight to Sean's side. Sean started to explain when Ava reached up and touched his lips. "Jake, you are way out of line here." Ava was not smiling. "I know you think you are protecting me, but you're not. You're meddling. They are putting together a surprise for my wedding, and I trust Sean, Sebastiana, and Frankie without question." Ava gave Jake a withering look, one that Jake found very uncomfortable. "Now," Ava said, "apologize to Sean and go with him and see what the surprise is, but don't you dare tell a soul." Jack Grimes had to laugh. Amy was standing right next to him and couldn't for the life of her see anything funny. "What's so funny?" "Jake, I used to think he wasn't afraid of anything alive, but I just watched a mere slip of a girl completely whip him." Jack was smiling. He must think a lot of her. Amy could smile now. "Yeah, on the way down here, the way he was talking about her, you'd have thought she was his daughter." Jack looked around to see who all was around him. "You know about her dad, don't you?" A sad look passed over Amy. "Yes, Jake told me." Amy then looked Jack up and down. "How are you feeling?" "Like I need to go lie down," Jack answered, and as soon as he had said it, Zara was at his side helping him to his bed. Amy followed, thinking she would check him out while she was there. Amy said, "Well, go lie down, but don't go to sleep. I'm going to go get my bag and come check and see how you are doing." Amy took the flagstone walk to the yellow house and picked up her med bag. Simon didn't have too much trouble getting time off to help with Sean's wedding. The Sanderson schools had a library that was the envy of some colleges, and the only reason for that was the Miles family. Simon had for years teased Sean about his love affair with bookstores, but the taunts were very hollow, and Simon only had to look at the bookshelves in his own office to be reminded of just how hollow. Simon, and for the most part all of his students, would be at the Miles Ranch setting up and getting things ready for Saturday. It was the school's way of giving back to someone who gave so much to the school. Sabrina White walked into Simon's office leading the blind student Johnny Diaz. Sabrina was a senior and was planning on becoming a teacher. For the last 2 years, she had been the student aide that helped Johnny's teacher. She also loved the little boy like a brother. Mr. Wells, the guys have the chairs loaded in the trailer. Simon turned to face the student speaking to him. Thanks, Sabrina. When are you and Johnny taking them out? Sabrina smiled. Mr. Wells was her favorite teacher and responded, well, I'm spending the night at Johnny's house, so I don't have to drive the 50 miles to the ranch and back. Sabrina lived on a ranch 25 miles west of Sanderson. Then we'll leave sometime after lunch tomorrow. That will leave enough time to set the chairs up, won't it? Simon nodded his head. Yeah, that will give us plenty of time to dust off the chairs and set them up. Have you got your sleeping bags and change of clothes in? Yes, sir, Sabrina started. If you hear of anyone that wants a ride out, let them know when we're going to leave. Sabrina turned to leave. I need to get Johnny home. Simon pulled out the list of things he was responsible for and checked off the chairs. Then he stood and walked out of his office and got into his pickup headed to get Sylvia, then on to the Miles Ranch. When Simon and Sylvia got to the ranch, the first thing that Simon had to do was help Sean and some of the AG boys slaughter the animals that would furnish the meat for the after-wedding feast. The Miles Ranch had always slaughtered all of the meat they used. To do that, they had long ago built a slaughter and a smokehouse. One of the things that Simon taught the young men and women that went through his AG class was how to kill and process meat animals. So today class was in session. By the time class was over, the 2 solar-powered freezers were full, and the meat for Saturday was packed in ice chests until tomorrow when the AG students would start cooking. By Friday evening, all the guests who would be staying the night had arrived, and the yellow house and the blue house were full to overflowing. Tom Master, the man who would perform the wedding, had almost filled the blue house's 3 bedrooms with his crew. There were his wife Monica and his daughter Tia, and Tia had brought her new friends Bill Carter and his wife Mari. Bill, as it turned out, had been a friend of Sean's dad years ago, and when Sean saw him, he was almost moved to tears. The 2 men had embraced each other as best they could, as Bill was for the most part confined to a wheelchair. Down at the bunkhouse, the 11 Brazilian girls made room for Sabrina White and Johnny Diaz. And Jan Barry, the other 2 girl AG students, had brought an air mattress, so they set it up in the corner of the bunkhouse. This left Johnny the only boy in a room of 14 girls. The other male AG students playfully teased Johnny about his situation, to which he replied, "Be nice to me, and I'll tell you about everything I see." One of the boys had got very excited about that until he realized Johnny's condition. He went from an excited smile to an embarrassed frown. Johnny leaned over and whispered something to Sabrina. "Yes," she said. "He's frowning, Johnny. You got him." Johnny turned to the direction where he had last heard the boy. "Sorry, but I like to tease, too." For Sabrina, it had been a glimpse into a side of Johnny that she had never seen before. He wasn't happy with his blindness, but he was accepting of it enough that he could tease someone about it. That night, the AG students and the Brazilian girls played cards and board games all night long as they kept watch on the meat that was slow cooking on the barbecues outside. In the morning, they would have to make the potato salad and coleslaw since there wasn't enough room to refrigerate it. Then they would be ready to feed all of the wedding guests. At the main ranch house, a small party was going on. They had gathered for supper, and Sean smiled as he put all of the extra leaves into the dining room table. His mother would have been tickled to death to have her dining room so full of happy people. There were 8 couples: Sean and Ava, Simon and Sylvia, Red and Maria, Jack and Zara, Jake and Amy, Josh and Sarah, Tom and Monica, and Bill and Mari. Also at the table were Mrs. Logan, Sandra Smith, Tia Masters, and little Tina. It was the fullest that Sean could ever remember, and as he looked at the people seated around that table, he realized he was a very rich man. He reached over and took Ava's hand. He squeezed her hand slightly, then they both stood as Sean started to speak. "I'd like to thank you all for being here." He looked into Ava's eyes, and she continued, "All of you are our friends. Some of you were Sean's friends, and some of you were my friends. Now you are our friends. It means so much to us for you to be here to share this time with us." Ava looked to Sean, and he finished, "Welcome to the bar, None. I hope you enjoy your time here. Tomorrow, after the wedding, Ava and I will be leaving. The rest of you may do what you wish, but the 2 of us will be gone for a week or so." Sean paused for a second, then continued, "Just before, as I looked around this table tonight, I realized that I am a very rich man, rich in friends. My marriage to Ava only adds to this wealth. Sean raised his glass. To friends. The table echoed. To friends. Sean and Ava sat back down. Red looked around the table then stood. Red looked at the couples sitting around the table. He raised his glass. To love. Red paused for a second and thought about what the words he was about to speak meant to him. For without it, where would we be? Echoes of to love were heard around the table. After that, the group settled down to a lively meal. Afterwards, 4 of the Brazilian girls took over and cleaned up the dining room and kitchen while the group adjourned to the courtyard to enjoy the rest of the evening. The group was about to break up and Zara was ready to take Jack by the arm and lead him to bed in spite of his protests that he was feeling fine. Before they had left, Amy turned to Red. That's how she was in the hospital. It's like she has a sixth sense that tells her how he really feels. Red nodded his head. Yes, but if you think those two are connected, you should watch those two. Red pointed to Sean and Ava. You didn't hear how she found them that night, did you? Amy shook her head. Never thought about it. But no, I didn't hear. How did she find them? Red started the story of that night, and Jack asked Zara to wait as he wanted to hear the story. After Red had finished, Amy sat open-mouthed. That's unbelievable. She looked around, realizing just how many people had witnessed the miracle. Looking at Sean, she asked, how do you explain that? Sean smiled. We are all subject to the calls of the gods and goddesses. The hard part is keeping your heart prepared and open to those calls. Ava smiled and pulled Sean closer. He's part of me now. It was easy to tell when he was in danger. It felt like part of me was dying. Zara spoke up. Yes, that is what I felt. It was like a hole was opening in my soul. Then on the helicopter, I felt the hole close up. That's when I saw that he was coming to. The only thing that Amy could think of was that she wanted this connection herself. She wondered if it had something to do with this place. She looked around. It didn't seem to be anything special, but for some reason it was like she could feel love here. Whatever the reason, because of the events here at this ranch, she had finally met someone she was very much in love with. After Jack and Zara had left, Hattie, Mrs. Logan, walked over to Ava. She hugged her and kissed her on the forehead as though Ava were her own child. She told Ava good night, and then she and her daughter went to bed. The group broke up with Sean and Ava being the last to leave the courtyard. For a few minutes, they just held each other there in the starlight. I love you, Ava. I love you more than life itself. Ava squeezed Sean, holding on to him as though her life depended on it. I love you too, Sean. You have filled up the hole that I had in my heart. I'll never be whole without you. They kissed, there in the starlight streaming through the French doors. As they kissed, they exchanged bits of each other's souls. Their love was strong enough to take them anywhere they wanted to go, strong enough to overcome the dangers that lay ahead of them. Tomorrow they would be joined. Tomorrow the last pieces would come together. Tomorrow they would be one soul in 2 bodies. Saturday morning broke with the sounds of birds singing and the smells of wood smoke and barbecue. Sean awoke to the growling of his stomach. Since the accident, his first moves in the morning were very slow. It wasn't hard to tell that he had overdone it the last 2 days, and right now his body was lodging a very vocal protest. Ava had gotten up earlier and returned with Red, who looked at Sean with a frown. I told you yesterday to slow down. I know. I don't suppose you have one of those shots, do you? Sean asked. What? You don't want to just force your way through the pain? Red was smiling. Yes, I have a shot for you. 2 actually. Red took Sean's arm and swabbed a spot on his bicep. Taking the first syringe, he injected the white liquid into the muscle of Sean's arm. When he had finished with that injection, he took and swabbed another place on Sean's arm and gave him the clear liquid Sean had come to know for its magical way of melting the pain from his body. There, Red said. It will take a little longer to feel the effects, but that should take care of the pain. The other shot was an antibiotic. That one place on your side is not healing like it should, and I don't want it to get infected, so I'm putting you back on some pills that will make sure you don't have an infection on your honeymoon. Red got up and left the room. Ava had brought Sean a cup of tea, and they sat talking quietly as they waited for the pain shot to take hold. In a few minutes, they would separate to get ready for the wedding. They kissed one last time before they parted. Simon had sent 7 of the boys to go and hold the push gates open so that there was no danger in any of the guests getting their cars damaged. The guests slowly filed in and were shown to the chairs in the grove where the wedding was to be held. Samantha Miller had left the cafe in the hands of Cookie and her niece. Sam was so happy today she refused to even worry about it. She found Ava with Sarah helping her getting dressed. They chatted briefly before Sam left to find Sean. Sean was dressed, as were Sebastiana and Frankie. With Maria's help, they had taken 2 of Sean's dad's suits and made a uniform reminiscent of Victorian England. Sebastiana would be the driver and Frankie the footman, or in this case, the footgirl. Maria put the finishing touches on the uniforms, then turned to Sean. You need to get. Is the carriage ready? Yes, it's waiting on the girls to bring it around. I just wish I could see the look on her face when she sees it for the first time. She has never seen that carriage before, Sean said. Don't worry, Maria started. I recruited Josh to videotape her as she comes out of the house. Sean smiled, pulled Maria into a hug, and kissed her on the cheek. You are the greatest. Sean left, headed for the Grove, and Sebastiana and Frankie left to move the carriage into position. At the Grove, the chairs had been set up in rows. Sean at the last minute asked that 4 chairs be left empty, 2 on the left side of the aisle and 2 on the right. Simon knew at once that those chairs were for the parents who couldn't be there. Sean was standing at the front chatting with Tom Masters when Sam found him. Sean, I am so happy for you. I knew the minute I met Ava that she was the one. You have always been like a brother to me. Now finally, after all these years, I am getting a sister. Sam kissed Sean, a sisterly kiss, a kiss between friends. Anyone who looked saw the tears forming in her eyes, but they were tears of happiness. It was time, and Ava was ready. Well, ready except for the long walk to the Grove. Sarah smiled at Ava. It's time. In fact, if we don't hurry, we are going to be late. Sarah opened the door and let her friend lead the way. She had been let in on the surprise at the last minute, so that she could make sure Ava went out the front door rather than the one in the kitchen. Go out the front. I'm afraid you'll get food on that white dress if you go through the kitchen, Sarah said, proud of herself, thinking she hadn't sounded as excited as she felt. Ava walked out the front door of the ranch house to see 2 horses pulling something coming into view. When she saw the carriage, her heart almost stopped. When carriage stopped at the end of the walk, just outside the gate, Frankie got off the back of it and put down a small step and waited for Ava with a smile brighter than 1,000 suns. Ava walked up to the carriage. Frankie took her hand and helped her into her seat. Then she helped Sarah to hers. Frankie picked up the step and took her place on the back of the carriage. Sebastiana turned around smiling at Ava and checking on Frankie at the same time. Are you ready, my lady? Sebastiana asked, her accent erased by the hours of practice she had put in on that very question. Ava felt like a queen. She was fighting back tears. I'm going to whip that Sean. He is going to make me ruin my makeup. Then looking at Sebastiana, she said in her best attempt at a British accent, Yes, driver. To the Grove, and do keep the dust down. Sebastiana smiled broadly and replied, Sure, no problem. She turned and with a practiced hand flicked the reins and set the 2 horses on their way. She was so overwhelmed by the carriage that she had not even noticed that Josh had been videotaping the whole thing. He hopped up on the back of the carriage beside Frankie and rode with them to the Grove. Sean saw the carriage coming, and the change on his face caused every head to turn to see what he was looking at. That caused a collective sigh and several comments. The carriage circled around and stopped. Frankie was at the side of the carriage in a flash with the step and helping Ava to descend from the carriage. Red was standing waiting. Ava had asked him if he would walk her down the aisle and give her away. It had been a request that had reduced Red's gruff exterior to tears. Even now he couldn't put into words how honored he had been by her asking. When they had practiced yesterday, he had answered the question, Who gives this woman away? With a friend of the family. As Red walked down the aisle with Ava on his arm, it came to him that it was not his right to give her away, and just as quickly the answer came to him. They stopped on the marks where he was to deliver his answer. Tom Masters stood before him in his white robe. Who gives this woman? Red turned and looked at the 2 empty chairs on the bride's side. He could almost see them sitting there so proud of their little girl, so sad that they were not there. Red answered, Dan and Marilyn Bell. Red kissed Ava on the cheek and saw the tear fall from her eye before he turned and went to sit in the place that Maria had saved for him. Sean had no idea that Red was going to say what he said, but when he looked at the 2 empty chairs, Sean did too, and there were Dan and Marilyn just as they had been in his dream. He turned to look at the 2 chairs behind him, and sure enough, there sat his mom and dad. He felt his heart swell and the tears fall. He took Ava's hand in his and said as quietly as he could, Look. Ava smiled and quietly responded, I know. The ceremony went along as planned save for Red's ad-lib, and soon it was time for Sean to kiss his bride. Sean lifted the veil to reveal her tear-stained face, and for the first time the people in the audience could see her tears as well. Sean looked on the face that had come to mean so much to him. I love you, my little butterfly. He then kissed her. As Tom introduced them as husband and wife to those in attendance, they turned. Ava blew a kiss to the 2 chairs where her parents sat as Sean bowed his head to them. Ava turned and blew a kiss to the chairs where Sean's parents sat as Sean mouthed, I love you, Mom and Dad. Sean took Ava's hand, and they started down the aisle together. At the end was Frankie with a smile brighter than day, waiting for them. Frankie and Sean helped Ava into the carriage. Sebastiana turned to Sean, Ready, boss? To the house, and don't spare the horses, Sean laughed. No problem. Sebastiana and Frankie chorused. The end. No siree. This is the beginning. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.